God. The time has come, dear Tuesday Review listeners, for the flashback episode re-upload of our old Last Jedi reviews. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Callum.
And, I'm sorry to listeners, but also, this is really important.
Especially considering, until recently, The Last Jedi was considered to be one of the greatest Star Wars movies.
Well, yeah, we
were hating on it before it was cool.
Yeah, we talk about in the episode about the weird critical reaction to it. We had to really deep dive into what the hell went wrong.
Yeah, and look,
because it's still confusing as to what the hell was going on.
The wounds haven't gone.
No,
but I will say that I think it's important. This episode or episodes are important because I feel like at the time, certainly at the time, we felt this way.
Yeah,
we were the only people who didn't like The Last Jedi.
Well, no, I don't think that's true.
Not like literally the only people, but
yeah,
a lot of the critical response was overwhelmingly positive.
This episode came out in when we released these episodes in December 2017, just after Last Jedi came out. I think we were really at the forefront of these are really major problems that need to be addressed that no one else was talking about, because the critics were loving it, fans were divided, but it's kind of we were just
I didn't see anyone kind of actually analyzing the movie.
not in the same extent we did, yeah. So we actually did 4 parts to the Last Jedi review because I was so devastated and so confused, and I needed to get to the bottom of why this film was so terrible.
None of us were the same after the subversion.
Yeah, even after those 4 parts, we didn't get through everything. Because we really got into the industry problems and the Disney problem and the superhero fatigue we were feeling at the time. And so, because we were live on the radio and we had the hour time slot, we recorded 4 separate hours and I released them part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4.
That was a long month.
Yeah, and so for this re-upload for the Tuesday review, I thought I'd combine parts 1 and 2 together. So there'll be a small pause between when part 1 ends and part 2 begins. And especially if you've been listening to the Tuesday review for, since the beginning or for the last few episodes, we talk about Star Wars a lot, and these flashback episodes and re-uploads will inform what we're talking about, and that we don't just like to whinge. It's we actually like to get to the bottom of the problem and try to, figure out where things went wrong.
We might be a bit better now in our presentation and our, the way we analyze movies. But we've always wanted to deep dive into these issues.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And those were kind of really the Star Wars episodes really are the I guess the first types of episodes where we really dug really deep.
Really deep, yeah.
We do it more now because we have more time and there's less pressure. But those episodes are really the first examples of where we could head as a show, almost.
A lot of the old Mammoths and Movies episodes were just more simple reviews. Some analysis, but because we only had that hour on the radio, it's not the same as it is now where we go deep for 2 hours.
Yeah, and it is important listening for the show. They're important in the overall Tuesday review canon.
Yeah.
It's our journey.
Exactly, yeah.
And, forgive us our rants.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan of the show and you like it when we talk about Star Wars, it probably is somewhat mandatory listening.
It's the content, my presentation might not be the best, especially because we only had the hour. I was talking very, very fast. And Callum and Nathan and Matt, who had joined us for the first part, they couldn't get a word in edgeways, and I was just, going rapid fire.
Yeah.
And my presentation might not be the best, but the content is so important for what we've been discussing on the Tuesday review. Yeah, it's just important to flesh out, what we've been talking about and what we will be talking about with the Rise of Skywalker review. It's funny because we talk about things that will obviously come up in the Rise of Skywalker review. But before we knew what Rise of Skywalker would be. This is also before we heard the news that Rian Johnson had only written 1 draft of The Last Jedi. So we did all 4 parts of the Last Jedi review thinking that Rian Johnson was just really bad at writing Star Wars.
We thought he sat down, he crafted it.
And it turns out that he just kind of wrote it on a napkin and filmed it. It was that. So that's an important thing to add that we didn't even know that at the time. Hope you enjoy this episode. Please listen to the whole thing. There's major trigger warning because you I get really mad and I get complain a lot. But I feel like it's important to listen to the whole thing. Don't skip parts because, you'll miss out on the context as to why I'm discussing certain things in the way I am. Yeah, hope you enjoy. Sound the alarm. You're listening to Man vs. Movies live here on 98.9 Northwest FM. I'm your host James, and on tonight's show I'll be reviewing Star Wars The Last Jedi. I'm joined in the studio tonight by Callum, Nathan and Matt. Thanks for coming in, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Anytime.
Sorry, James. Before you start, I just want to give a word, a warning to all,
rant warning,
trigger warning,
trigger warning, grumpiness warning, yelling a warning. I'm going to get mad.
This isn't going to be pretty. So if you really love this film, please turn it off.
Turn it off now.
But if you're interested into what we think, please stay tuned.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard the previous Man vs. Movies Star Wars special, the first one was back a year ago. That was episode 8 of Man vs. Movies. And we also did one last week, the second Man vs. Movies Star Wars special, which was episode 59. So download those. Check out what I talk about, how I talk about the original movies and Force Awakens, and that'll give some context to my feelings towards The Last Jedi. And also check out the Looper episode, which was episode 58 of Man vs. Movies, which of course will provide context for the new Last Jedi as well, because of Rian Johnson being the director. So I'm now going to go straight into my spoiler-free review of Star Wars The Last Jedi. No spoilers for this section of the show. So Last Jedi was written and directed by Rian Johnson, who I'm a big fan of. He did movie Brick, The Brothers Bloom, and Looper. All three movies I really like. Brick and Looper, two of my favorites. Of course, this movie takes place right where Force Awakens ends. And picks up where the Resistance is escaping from the First Order, who are now sort of invading the galaxy, and Rey is now on the island training with Luke. The music, of course, is done by the one and only John Williams. I think the score's a little better than The Force Awakens, but it's still underwhelming. I think at this point it's just really feeling kind of tired. The cinematography is by Steve Yedlin, who did Rian Johnson's previous films. I think it looks a lot better than Force Awakens. I think this movie looks pretty nice most of the time. It has some great shots, but I think just in terms of like how they color grade modern films, and of course they have to be somewhat consistent with Force Awakens, and so I don't really like the way it looks a lot of the time. And I think a lot of the problem to do with that is how I didn't like the designs in The Force Awakens, and a lot of that carries over. And of course, despite the emphasis they keep putting on the practical elements, there's still way too much CGI, green screen everywhere. It gets a bit much. The action is generally better than The Force Awakens, but there's still, again, too much CGI, spaceships flipping around. There's no little tension. And Rian Johnson at points goes completely ham with the green screen sets and what force powers can do, and all the crazy little critters running around. There's just too many of them. I hate the porgs, those little ugly, stupid, annoying penguin seal things. They're terrible, and I hate them. And you know, people are like, oh, they're not that bad, they're not in that much of the film. They're in pretty much the whole film, and they ruin very specific scenes throughout the whole movie. Finn is given a little bit more development this time around. He isn't just a comic relief character like he was in The Force Awakens, but really, you can cut him out of the film. It doesn't really matter. He's not really a good character at all. He's not really given much to do in terms of the overall big picture. Rey is still a non-character. The things she says don't really make sense for her character because her background and experiences haven't really informed her to that. She just says things that a young Luke would in the original, because really she's just a stand-in for a new Luke, and really she's not a character on her own. Which is a bit sad, because I think Daisy Ridley could do a really good job with a more fleshed out, better written character. Kylo Ren is still the most interesting character in the movie, and I just think Adam Driver is really, really good. He knocked it out of the park. He's always on top of his game. He really knocks it out of the park. Leia is given a bit more to do this time around, but is generally pretty much pointless.
I thought, honestly, I thought Leia...
Yeah,
it's not that's not Leia. It wasn't.
Yeah,
Leia
there are also points in this film where she kind of disappears, and it's kind of like we really need to be seeing her now. She didn't really do anything in Force Awakens. We really need her back. And especially now that Carrie Fisher has passed away. Of course, they didn't know that at the time of filming, but it's kind of like we really needed that, and they didn't take the opportunity there.
I feel like they sort of wasted their opportunity with the trilogy of original sort of heroes.
Exactly.
Like all of them have been pretty much wasted.
Exactly. And Mark Hamill is great as Luke. I think he does a really good job. But I think what Rian Johnson did with Luke's character was wrong on so many levels.
I feel like it's a crime somewhere. Like there has to be some country that Rian Johnson can't legally go to now.
He can't come here. Eh?
Yeah.
Actually, no. If Rian Johnson wants to come on my show, I'll get him on my show. I'm not. Yeah, that's. I'm not banning him.
We can just talk about Brick, and we can talk about Luke.
Oh yeah.
We do not discuss
we'll
Star
not
Wars.
talk about Star Wars. Other minor characters, Poe, a new character, Rose, pretty much pointless. Rose is just the new character they have to bring in because it's the sequel. She could be cut out. Everyone could be cut out, really. Like Force Awakens, like Rogue One, these characters can be plucked out one by one, and you don't really notice them.
Can I be honest with you? This movie didn't even need Luke. Like Luke was pointless in this film.
Pretty much, yeah.
I liked his performance in it, but he offered nothing.
Yeah,
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. However, Benicio del Toro, that guy's on another level.
Oh man, he's the best.
I don't know what drugs that guy's on, or what planet he's from, but he's just always on another level. He's just doing his thing.
He was the guy that played the
DJ, the code breaker.
Code breaker. That's right. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because I've been saying these characters can be cut out of the film. They're kind of pointless, and in Usual Suspects, Benicio del Toro's character, the reason he kind of speaks, you can't really understand what he's saying, is because his character wasn't really important to the film. So Benicio del Toro made a choice to make his character kind of a mushmouth, like you couldn't really understand, like because he's pointless. And I think this is another example of that. His character is so wacky and strange, and he's got this weird stutter. And I think he understood that this character's fluff, and so he was just getting everything out of it because he's on another level to all the other actors. He's crazy, like he's out there. So the story itself has too many subplots, stops, starts, twists, and fake outs, and it's too drawn out. This movie's too long. It's the longest Star Wars movie, and it doesn't need to be this long.
The whole middle bit was just like, why is this happening?
Exactly.
Nothing essentially happens.
Pretty much,
Right.
Yeah. It also has a bit too much of The Empire Strikes Back in there, with a little bit of Return of the Jedi thrown in. A lot of reviews have been saying, it differentiates itself from Empire Strikes Back, but I think there are enough similarities to start making it a problem.
Yep.
There are entire sections of the movie that could be condensed or cut out. It's too long. The structure and pacing feels off. I call it Attack of the Clones pacing. It's like kind of slow in areas, and then it'll just have it'll have crazy critters and CGI stuff going on, and then it'll be a quote unquote mystery, but you really don't care, and nothing actually matters, and it's a waste of time.
Sure.
There's a joke every second, like it's just jokes.
Dude. So
they're not even good ones.
They're not even good.
Not, yeah.
In the cinema I went to last night, it was full.
Yeah.
Not one person laughed. Not one. Their jokes were that bad.
It's all like CGI slapsticky stuff, aliens falling over onto each other, fighting on each other. It's prequel levels of terrible stuff. And there's a sequence in the middle of the film involving Finn and Rose that it feels like it's out of the prequels. It doesn't feel like Star Wars at all. It feels like a just wibbly wobbly CGI stuff, them running around, jumping. It feels like something out of Fantastic Beasts or Harry Potter. It's like CGI crap everywhere. It slows the film down when we should be focusing on Rey, Luke, Kylo, the more interesting characters. The main drive behind the story involving the Resistance and their struggle against the First Order is one of the most painfully slow and boring plot devices ever seen on film. The whole, the Resistance getting away from the First Order is literally just them driving in a straight line very slowly. It was a bad idea to begin with, and I don't know why people are trying to defend it. And like I said, every time we cut away from Luke, Kylo, and Rey, who are the most interesting characters, who have the most emotional development, we just keep cutting away to the slapstick jokes, to Finn doing something, to Poe doing something, to other less interesting subplots, when we should be more focusing on those core characters that haven't been developed in The Force Awakens and are now not being developed in this sequel.
Well, dude, as I said with the previous one, I've spoken to you about it. Rey, even when she was like getting her ass kicked, I couldn't care less. Like I
don't care about any of the characters in this film, even the original trilogy characters.
Yeah, I couldn't care about Luke.
Care less.
I wanted Luke to be something in this film, and he. Honestly, the moment you see him at the start of the film, and I won't spoil it because
we'll get into it.
This is a spoiler-free zone, but the first thing he does, and you know what I'm talking about, I'm like, oh my god, I knew from that moment we were doomed, and that's
So just by the fact that this takes place right after The Force Awakens, it kind of has to take elements from The Force Awakens, which is a big problem for this movie because it has to fix a lot of the crap that J.J. Abrams set up. But then, on the other hand, it completely ignores or goes against stuff in The Force Awakens. And so it becomes this contradictory movie to its predecessor. And a lot of the questions raised in The Force Awakens that we needed to be answered are just completely ignored. And it's almost like where The Force Awakens is a reaction to the prequels, it's just a nostalgia trip. It's just a safe zone to say this is Star Wars. The Last Jedi is almost a reaction to Force Awakens, and it's saying, the original trilogy, it's de-mythologizing the original trilogy, it's de-mythologizing the Force. It's a big FU to Abrams, who's now returning for the 9th movie, and I guess is now going to have to take what happens in this movie and kind of contextualize it for his style and what he thinks of Star Wars. So it's this big mess of a trilogy that it's gonna go, it's contradicting itself. It doesn't make it. There's no sense of consistency, and it's gonna end with a trilogy where nothing really ends up happening.
And there'll be a reboot at the end of 9.
Pretty much.
We can say there's a whole 3 movies where nothing happens.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what do you mean by reboot? Like they're going to redo it again? Like?
Oh, no. I mean, like the state of the universe will be exactly the same as it was at the end of the previous movie.
Yeah. And they've only got that one movie left. And this movie feels like it should have been the first movie. It's kind of like literally they say, like, burn everything to the ground, kill the past. Characters say that in this movie. And I'm just like, you can't do that. This is the second movie. We should be setting up the characters in the world, and we're not. Like, there's only one movie left,
they should be setting up the finale for the movie.
Exactly.
Instead, they're just like
they're still doing the beginning,
and sort of looking at their
This almost feels like a prologue to the new trilogy. Like they're still trying to figure out what this world and what the characters are, and they clearly don't understand. And it feels like a Zack Snyder DC movie. And
I read a comment on the internet today, and it just said the problem with these movies are they're Marvel movies in a Star Wars wrapping.
Pretty much, yeah. They've turned Star Wars into a superhero movie, but like I've talked about in my Justice League episode, like Zack Snyder was someone who clearly didn't really understand the superheroes he was making, but he was trying to do this edgy interpretation. But at the same time, he had to say, "Hey, look at all these characters you love," and this is kind of a Star Wars version of that. I think Rian Johnson's a bit more aware of what he's doing, but still, it just doesn't work. Now, in saying all of this, I saw Last Jedi a second time. I did the same with Force Awakens, which I hated upon first viewing, but I saw it again because I was like, I want to see what the fuss is about. Why is everyone loving this movie? What did I miss? And now that I've had my strong reactions to it, I can sit and I can listen to the dialogue, I can look at the visuals, and I can sort of soak it in even further. And I've now come to the conclusion that the problems with this movie are so deep, it's hard for me to just express them in a review. And so I've kind of come to the decision that we're just going to have to keep discussing this movie until I'm satisfied. So pretty much from now until forever, every episode of Man vs. Movies is going to be about The Last Jedi because, there's been a lot of discussion about, what this, is this movie good? Is this movie bad? Is this movie better than the prequels? Is this movie better than Force Awakens? Yada, yada, yada. And I'm just like, it even goes deeper than that. And you have to bring in conversations of like, arguments of like, what does superheroes mean for the state of Hollywood right now? How do people view movies? How do people view the original? Like, it just becomes this weird abstract thing where you have to keep in bringing these outside arguments that are almost outside of the film itself, and it keeps going. And I can't reconcile. I can't express to you. My brain doesn't work fast enough for me to talk out the words.
James, the answer is money.
And that is
We'll get into that too.
And that is the bottom line.
We'll get into that. The way Rian Johnson deals with legacy, mythology, and the Force are so extreme. I felt like I was watching a superhero movie. They've also pretty much made Force Awakens into the Fast and Furious franchise, where this feels like Fast and Furious 7. You know what I mean? It's just crazy stuff happening. Characters we know and love kind of doing crazy and crazier things.
But it was just slow though, James. Like it wasn't fast.
Exactly, but you know what I'm saying is like every movie now is a big blockbuster franchise that feels like a superhero movie. Even Fast and Furious is a superhero movie now.
Yeah, it loops back into what you were saying before about what are movies on the big screen now,
Exactly.
and they're all these action sort of explosive, quick sort of superhero ensemble films.
Yeah.
And we've said it many times on the show. That's all they show on the movies these days, pretty much. To find like films like maybe the original series back in the day, they wouldn't get made now.
No,
Scorsese can't get a movie made now.
Exactly. We're at that point now where it's just CGI and crap. You know,
it's funny that the reaction to this movie is not too dissimilar from the reaction to Mother. In the sense that...
Exactly.
Because we remember that... I'm just looping that into what Nathan was saying about how movies don't get released anymore. Like, indie movies don't really get released anymore, and Mother was kind of against the grain.
Yeah.
And so I can understand why big movie companies would choose to release blockbusters over movies like Mother.
They're trying to release the safe bet. But it's like I said, it's Star Wars. People are going to see it regardless. So they should have... we'll get into that. I think one of the major problems is that the romance has gone out of Star Wars. I'm not just talking about relationship romance. I'm talking about the sweeping epic adventure that was the original movies. They used to be a space opera. It was about good versus evil. And now it's become this muddled mess of a DC, Zack Snyder-esque, like the Jedi aren't as great as you think they are. The original movies aren't as great as they are. Kill the past, and it's just like it's getting bogged down in stuff that it might be interesting to think about. It might be interesting to explore, but this movie fails to explore those things on so many levels. And it ends up being a just contradictory, one towards Force Awakens, but also within itself. And there are so many problems just on technical levels, CGI and stuff like that. And it goes so deep. And we'll now get into spoilers because I'm kind of repeating myself. I hated this movie, but really, if you're a Star, it's Star Wars. People are going to see it regardless of what I say. So now I'm just talking for my own, to sort of trying to figure out where everything went wrong.
Yeah, I don't think any of us here want to demonize anyone who liked the film.
No. If you like the film, that's fine. But the problems for me run so deep that it's not even about if you liked it or if I didn't like it. It's about the mouse, as we said, and it's about
the industry in general.
It becomes not even about... I mean, the film itself has so many problems within itself, but then, of course, there's all the outside problems which we need to address, which is why I want to talk about it
what we mean is the problems with this movie are not singular to this movie. They're symptoms of a larger problem.
Pretty much, yeah. This is Rian Johnson's first bad movie. I'm now pretty worried about his original series of movies that he's making after this, Star Wars movies.
So is he doing more Star Wars?
Yeah, he's doing 3 more. They gave him his own trilogy.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so now I'm worried about that.
Is it going to be like a continuation?
No one knows for sure. We'll talk about that later.
May the Force be with us.
Yeah, we're going to need it. I died a little inside watching this movie. I didn't think I could be hurt again by another Star Wars movie. I kind of accepted that I didn't like this new series of movies, but I'll go in, Rian Johnson, I like, it's fine. I can't believe it. It devastated me.
We talked on the show about how much we were looking forward to it because Rian Johnson's such a great director. I'm pretty sure we said on the show, Looper was such an amazing movie. How can it go wrong?
This film broke me. I find it hard to express myself about this movie.
I know how you're feeling.
Yeah.
I walked out of there. I waited for the end of the credits. I felt hollow. And the guy was like, the usher was trying to, wait for me to get out. And
I can't leave now. I'm a bit stunned. I just need to sit here for 5 minutes.
I did.
That's what I did. Yeah.
I sat there until the end, and I'm like, I couldn't believe it. I felt hollow. I was like, what did I just watch? Yeah. And not only that, it's the fact that I spoke to you before I go in to watch it, and then you're like, Matt, I'll be honest. Prepare yourself. It isn't great. I'm like, okay, so it honestly can't be as bad as the previous one. I'm like, okay, it can't be. I went in there and I was like, oh my god, it's this all over again. Why is this happening? Why has Star Wars
Why
become
are they
this?
doing this to us?
Why does Disney hate us?
I was just left confused. I was left absolutely confused.
I think what was funny is like because Callum, Nathan, and I went to see the midnight showing, and we got out of the movie at about 3:00 in the morning, and I was just standing in the parking lot, just like yelling at Callum, Nathan, like, "What the hell is this? Like, this doesn't make sense." And they're like, "Oh, we're tired. We're going to go home." And I'm like, "You guys go home. I'm going to stand in the parking lot and yell." And they drove off, and I'm in the parking lot. I'm like, what's going on? I don't know how to feel.
Man arrested in Brominus for yelling at passing cars.
Yeah, pretty much. Dude, it actually made me say, like, I got home and my partner's like, she's like, "Oh, so how was it?" And I'm like, "You know who Jar Jar Binks is?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, I'm like, "Jar Jar Binks, he could have saved this movie." This is how bad this movie was.
The return of Darth Jar Jar.
The return of Jar Jar.
Oh god.
He wasn't. If everyone hates Jar Jar Binks, yeah, and I get why.
Yeah.
But he was actually interesting compared to the characters in this film. This film, it made me so upset. I'm like, I've loved Star Wars since I can remember, and I felt hollow.
Yeah.
I felt hollow.
We'll now go into the spoiler section. So from now until the end of the show, we'll be doing full spoilers. This is a major spoiler warning for Star Wars: The Last Jedi and all other Star Wars movies and all other expanded universe material. But especially because, a lot of people get, it's been a few days since the movie came out, but still people might haven't seen it. So if you haven't seen The Last Jedi, we'll be talking major spoilers. So this is a major spoiler warning. So I'm just going to start talking, and as soon as time runs out, we'll stop, and then next, next episode we'll kind of pick it up.
Can I just say, can we start with maybe like talking about what we liked about the film before? Because I don't. Look,
if we can be quick.
Generally, we all dislike the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I've got little things peppered throughout my things that I did like, but like I like Kylo Ren's new outfit. I like
Benicio del Toro was one I wanted to mention. I thought his performance was good.
I liked Yoda.
Oh god.
At least it was a puppet.
Oh no, we won't talk about it now. We'll talk about it later. That's one of the major problems with this movie.
The only thing I liked in this film, and I kid you not, was the fact that Ren actually showed emotion. And like when he smashed his helmet, I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere. And that was it.
Kylo Ren's the only interesting character in this new series.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I said in my Force Awakens thing, like he should have been the main character of this new series, like the Bizarro Luke.
It should have been a story from the dark side.
That would have been way more interesting.
It would have been way more interesting.
But even then, it's like, why are we even having this conversation? Like, the movies should have been about Luke training the new Jedi. Like, they shouldn't have been trying to reboot the series. They shouldn't have been trying to deconstruct the series. Anyway, so I think one of the major problems with The Last Jedi is the kind of main conflict of the movie is literally the Resistance ship. There's one Resistance ship left, and it's got the entirety of the Resistance on this one ship. And it's slowly getting away, very slowly getting away from Snoke's.
It's the O.J. Simpson chase. It's exactly what it is.
Even slower.
It's just fast enough that they can't get hit.
Yeah, so it's like, and Snoke's
not fast enough to get away.
Snoke's got this giant ship that's like the size of like 100 Star Destroyers. And they got and for some reason, because Rian Johnson says so, the little ship is just fast enough so that it stays out of range of the bigger ship, which doesn't make any goddamn sense. Rian Johnson. The problem with this movie is Rian Johnson creates problems that weren't a problem before, just so he can have conflict in the movie.
I mean, and there's a fundamental flaw with that as well, because they're space lasers. They would just keep going until
and
they hit the target.
And here's like, and then of course they can't use light speed because now again Rian Johnson has introduced a problem that wasn't there before.
Fuel?
Is that they can that they can track them through light speed, which wasn't a problem before. Now also fuel, which wasn't really a problem before.
Boys.
Yeah.
Now of course.
Stop with the servo, lads.
Now of course the Snoke ship's lasers can't reach because they're just staying out of range, which again is stupid. Another problem that doesn't make sense.
And they've got a shield that's up that makes that.
Now what doesn't make sense also is that they've got little Star Destroyers around them. Now why can't those speed up and attack? Or why can't they use light speed to jump ahead and then turn around and head them off if they've got multiple ships? And also, then why don't they just send a whole bunch of fighters? Now, they make this excuse in the movie that once the fighters reach the resistance vessel, that they're too far out of range so that the big ship can't cover them. But I'm like, they've already gone out there. They might as well do their dirty work. And since when does the First Order care about the safety of its pilots? Like, Kylo Ren blows up the bridge of the resistance ship, which apparently had its shields up but didn't really do anything.
Yeah, that made no sense.
Which doesn't make any sense. So he could have just pressed his torpedoes a second time
and blew the whole thing up.
But instead, Hux says, "Please return because we can't cover you." And Kylo goes, "All right," and turns around. I'm like, none of this needs to happen. It's the stupidest plot device I've ever seen in a movie. Rian Johnson is creating problems just so he can make the main conflict of his film be a really, 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 really slow car chase.
And dude, and you know that whole section of the movie, if that was cut out, I mean, it wasn't even needed, James. That took so much time.
And then there's the problems of like the fact that this starts right where Force Awakens ends. One, it makes the opening crawl pointless because the opening crawl literally says what happens at the end of the Force Awakens in no detail. But then it's like they just jump straight into, which is where the Empire Strikes Back similarities start happening, where it's like the Resistance is getting away from the Empire, which is the First Order, and it's like why did Rian Johnson choose this specific conflict for his movie? Like, he could have done so many things. Like with Force Awakens, they could have done so many things. He's picking the worst option. And I don't understand why. Then, of course, you've got Leia gets blown out of the bridge of the ship in what this is probably one of the worst parts of the movie, one of the worst things I've ever seen. Leia gets sucked down into space. I've pretty much resigned myself to her death because of the real actress's death.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, okay. Well,
I thought it was strange because they said that Carrie Fisher had a great performance in the film and that they didn't want to touch it. But I'm like, maybe they just decided to give her a send off. But it also felt very violent. She gets sucked down into space. It was very strange. So she's floating in space. She's frozen solid. She's dead. And then she kind of, like, the ice starts melting off her face, and she kind of force pulls herself back into, and she does this weird Mary Poppins floating thing where she floats back through the broken starship. Yeah. And I'm just like, what is this?
Can I...
Leia has the Force, but now she can pretty much warn off death by using Force pull powers. I don't understand where this is coming from.
This is... I understand that it's not this. The EU is not canon, so we won't talk about that anymore. And I understand that the Force is a mysterious thing, and it wasn't shown in the original trilogy, and I understand that.
I'm not saying the Force isn't powerful enough to do these things. I'm just like, this is coming at the very beginning of the movie. Yeah. Leia has never shown any powers this powerful, and I think this ties into more problems of...
my question was actually a technical question.
Yeah.
Because not just you, a lot of people had problems with this particular scene. Yeah. What is the difference? Why is this so ridiculous, but Force lightning is perfectly acceptable?
Because
Leia hasn't shown anything like that.
Yeah, because Force lightning, the only time we've seen Force lightning is when Emperor Palpatine did it. And everyone's talking about how old he is, how powerful he is. Also, let's just create some bullshit science here, and let's just say he controls the static in the atmosphere and shocks him. Like, that's not a big deal. But Leia dies. Let's face it. She freezes solid. There's a good 10, 20, 30 seconds of her face frozen. Yep. Like, it wasn't a quick.
She wasn't probably dead because her eyes are still in her sockets.
It wasn't a quick shot of her in space and then quickly sucking back in before she died of exposure. She was out there for a long time, and so now you're telling me the Force can kind of defrost you in space, propel you back into the ship to where the atmosphere is, and sustain you to back to full health. But, like, yes, maybe she might be that powerful, but this is coming at the beginning of the film. And then I have more problems. Sorry, man, I'm going to just keep talking.
All good.
Then I have more problems. All the characters with the Force in this movie are all too powerful. So in the original movie, everyone talks about how powerful Darth Vader is, and he becomes a fearful enemy. That
boogeyman.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, but yeah.
And exactly, yes. And Luke is the underdog. He's the new trainee. He's the weak guy who rises up against the ultimate power in the universe to defeat the bad guy. So there's stakes there. There's struggle. There's the underdog.
There's a storyline.
Yes. Now in the new movie, Rey is already the most powerful Jedi in the world. Kylo's already the most powerful Jedi in the world. Snoke is already the most powerful Jedi in the world. Luke is the most powerful Jedi in the world. And now Leia is the most powerful Jedi in the world. Do you see my problems here?
But
Every character is overpowered.
The thing is, Snoke should have been more powerful.
Exactly. And this is where...
And he wasn't.
There's
Yeah,
no...
we'll get to that bit in a
Yeah,
sec.
if Rey can just go head to head with all the other characters, or if Leia can go head to head, like, what's the point? There's no struggle, there's no tension. Then you get the problems of... What does Rian Johnson think the Force is? The Force, to me, is this mystical power, you know, pretty much what we see in the original movies. Now, you can argue that in the original movies, they didn't have the technology, so a lot of the Force powers are pretty simple. But I think that's what
made
makes
it
them
good.
special,
Yeah.
because every time the Force is used, just like every time a lightsaber is used, it's for a special reason. It's for an emotional... The Force has weight, because it has an emotional weight when it's used. Now, in the new movies... Sorry, Callum. Now, in the new movies, everyone can use the Force willy-nilly. This is a problem with the prequels as well. And everyone's so powerful. They're just flipping around and Force projecting themselves and pretty much curing death. That's like, well...
It's not special.
It's not special anymore. And then you get problems of... like, I think Rian Johnson thinks... Or his interpretation of the Force is it's like the mutant gene from X-Men. It's something that's inside you, and that when something very emotionally charged happens to you, or if you're in danger, it kind of comes out. And I think that's what he's doing with Leia. Leia was in danger, and so her inner Force powers has come out. And the same happens with Rey. And this is a problem with Force Awakens as well, where it's like she hears the word Force, and that automatically makes her the most powerful Jedi. It doesn't make sense. And I think... To me, this really brings in problems of, like, I feel like Rian Johnson thinks midi-chlorians are a legit thing. Like, he was taking that, and I wouldn't be, like, there's a point where Luke is explaining the Force to Rey, and I was almost 100% sure he was going to start talking about midi-chlorians. Now
I would have walked out.
Now I know Rian Johnson didn't want to alienate his audience that much. I mean, he already did with a lot of other aspects of the film, but like, it feels like Rian Johnson thinks the midi-chlorians are what the Force is. It's a mutant gene from X-Men. It's like in Apocalypse, when Cyclops is in high school, and he, you know, his eyes start itching. You know, X-Men's about puberty and you know, your inner powers coming out and whatever. And it's like, and the bully chases him, and then he kind of unleashes his eye beams and like blasts the bully away. Like, I think Rian Johnson thinks the Force is a mutant power. Like, it's something that when you hit puberty, it kind of bursts out of you, or when someone corners you, it kind of bursts out of you. And to me, that's not what the Force is. The Force is something that if you really believe in yourself and you really train and you really feel your surroundings, you can become more powerful.
The Force in the original trilogy is probably the best expression of it, even like because there's power in the simplicity. Like, when you move a boulder, you're not, you know, doing all this crazy stuff. Moving the boulder is impressive enough already.
I think it's as simple as in Empire Strikes Back, when Yoda, you know, says, you know, size matters not. Yep. Look at me. And then he lifts the X-Wing out of the swamp when Luke can't do it. That's really the expression of what the Force is. That it doesn't matter how big you are, it doesn't matter what weapons you have. Now, of course, then in the prequels, it's pretty much no... One, it's how much cancer you have in your blood, and two, it's pretty much, you know, how many weapons you have, how big you are, because then Yoda flips around with a lightsaber. So it's like, no, it's not about size, it's about how good you are fighting. And I think these new movies, Last Jedi especially, kind of follows that, where it's like, it's more about... you know, how powerful you are, rather than, you know, what you believe. If you believe in yourself, if Luke believed he could lift the X-Wing, he could have lifted it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And now in these new movies, it's a raw power that's inside everyone.
It's about power levels more than belief.
Exactly. It's pretty much Dragon Ball Z.
Over 9,000.
Exactly. Yeah. They've turned it into a superhero movie where all the characters are so powerful. I said in my Justice League review, you know, everyone's so powerful. Everyone sort of morphs into this one character where none of the characters feel separate. And it's the same. It's like all the Jedi characters in this movie, all the Force users in this movie are so powerful and can do so many extraordinary things.
They're Megasword.
Exactly. They might as well fuse together and become a giant Jedi. Like, that would have been cool, actually. I mean, I've already taken up all the time. Then, of course, you got that Finn and Rose go to the casino planet, which is just it's
worst
the worst
scene.
It's the worst scene. It's straight out of Attack of the Clones. It's straight out of any of the worst prequel stuff you can imagine. They go to Gringotts. Apparently, there's gold coins everywhere. There's this drunken leprechaun who's trying to shove gold coins into BB-8, thinking it's a slot machine. Like, the whole thing is just it's just CGI, like, slapsticky jokes. It's not funny. It drags the movie down when we should be with Luke and Rey and Kylo. And pretty much it's there so that Finn can learn that war is bad. And there's literally a scene where Rose is like, this place looks beautiful, but if you look closer, it's actually terrible. And then Finn looks through some binoculars and he sees child abuse and animal abuse in the same exact scene. Like, and it's like a Simpsons joke. You know what I mean? It's like there's this big fat ugly alien with a laser whip whipping an animal, and then he turns around and starts whipping a kid. It's like Futurama. You know what I mean? Like,
the humor in this film.
Canto Bight, the casino planet, is pretty much Mars in Futurama. Didn't Amy's parents make Mars into a casino? Yeah. Like, it's pretty much that. Sorry, Callum.
One of my biggest problems with the new saga basically is the humor.
Exactly, yeah.
I feel like that this is not my opinion. This was someone I read on the internet. They said that people keep comparing the original trilogy and the new trilogy by saying, yeah, but Han was a funny guy.
Yeah.
The humor in the original trilogy was completely different.
I can't remember if I talked about it on my other Star Wars shows, but the humor in the original trilogy came from the character interactions. So, Han would say something snarky and Leia would do a quippy comeback, Because the characters were different people, they kind of butted heads, and that created humor. Now, the humor in the new movies is
cringy.
It's cringe and it's slapstick, and it's there's literally a bit where Finn and Rose crash through the casino on these like horses, and there's this like opera singer alien lady with like 6 or 8 like giant breasts and like big pink lips and tentacles, and as the horses are coming towards her, she goes, oh, like, I'm like, what is it? This isn't funny, this isn't smart. Like, also, like, the production, just from the technical aspect, like, the production design doesn't look like Star Wars. There are people wearing tuxedos. And I don't understand why the same happened in Force Awakens. I don't understand why they think practical effects means bad rubber masks and weird rubbery floppy tentacle people. Also, where are all the species from the original trilogy?
Exactly. Wait, I never thought about the Twi'leks. What happened to the Twi'leks?
There's no Twi'leks. There's no Quarren. There's no Rodans. There's no. You don't see them.
That's scandalous.
Exactly.
James, it's like they're trying to make all that not happen anymore.
Exactly.
They don't want it to be part of it.
It's almost like, here's the nostalgia of the original movies, but let's also wipe them from the slate because this is a reboot. These movies are reboots. They're not sequels.
What was wrong with the Twi'leks?
Nothing.
I'm gonna have to leave the studio now to really think about my life.
You look at that. Look at the cantina scene in Force Awakens, Maz's cantina. Look at the casino scene in Last Jedi. You don't see any of the classic. At least one. Drop one in there. It makes sense.
I think this shows the disregard for the original trilogy. And
exactly.
If you're listening to this film and you're one of the people who think that anyone who dislikes this film is a troll.
Yeah.
And because there's a whole thing out there now that the only people who don't like the film are people who only accept the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And you can have a new trilogy, but what's wrong with including things from that made the
but
original so
again, it becomes part of the world building and the stuff that these movies don't do well. And it's not even about nostalgia. It's about, in the background of a scene, we should be getting the feeling that there's this bigger world that was in the original movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
it's not even about, hey, look, it's that guy.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
It's more about a bigger world. It's like you don't even notice it.
The big issue is, James, when I watched the original trilogy, I feel like I'm in a different planet. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm there. Like
Yeah.
I can dream about this place.
And it comes with that kind of sweeping, romantic, epic
does.
feeling, which doesn't happen in the new movie.
And this is just like, it's just what it
CGI
is.
flappy flop.
It's like they're willfully not including things that made the original trilogy great to begin
They
with.
don't really understand, the world building and the design of the things, and
Goes
on
back to
top
what
of the
we were
themes
saying
and the
before.
characters and stuff.
It has to fit in the framework of
Of
an
the Disney-
Avengers movie,
Yeah,
of a
of the
Disney,
Disney. It's a
Disney
Disney movie.
factory
Yeah.
movie.
Has to have a happy ending, and things have to work out in the end.
Yeah.
And no,
Yeah.
it's Star Wars.
So
it
now-
shouldn't be this way.
Now, Callum, we were talking before about what are the things we liked. I think Rey force communicating with Kylo across the galaxy. I really liked that.
I like the fact that
I
you
think-
never saw them. They
Yeah.
always looked at the camera.
Yeah, they're kind of like looking off camera, and
yeah.
like Rey is on the island with Luke looking off camera, and then Kylo is like looking at her and even though he's on his ship, and they're separated by the galaxy, and you never see them in the same frame until one point in the film, and I thought that's where Rian Johnson really shined. That's where I'm like, here's the Rian Johnson I know. Here's the great character development that I wanted from the movie. But then they keep cutting to a joke, or they keep cutting to Finn or Poe doing something boring. And really the emotional through line of the movie keeps getting pushed out of the way by BB-8 doing something stupid.
The problems regarding the slow car chase.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, why have this through line of the slow car chase if you have to keep cutting back to it? Why not just they blast to a planet and Poe goes off on a mission and Finn goes and meets up with Rey and all the characters kind of come together? Yeah, it becomes so... It takes away from the best parts of the film, and it kind of highlights how, the structure of the film doesn't really work, the pacing. And I also didn't like how Rey kind of disappears from the climax of the movie.
Yeah, she's not
there. And Rian Johnson keeps saying within this movie, through the characters, like, burn the past, let's move forward. Get rid of the old characters, here are the new characters. But then the entire climax of this movie, Rey literally disappears and Luke fights Kylo. and then Rey...
Dude, that scene is
man.
Tupac. It's
We'll
Tupac
get-
hologram.
we'll get into
what
that.
the hell was that?
We'll get into that. But then Rey's big climactic thing that she has to overcome is moving some rocks with the Force. Like, this is our new Luke. We should be following her, and yet Luke gets the big battle moment.
This is why-
and she gets like literally off screen.
This is why I don't care about her. Like don't get me wrong. Like,
She's a non-character.
She's a non-character. Like, I'm all for having anyone as to be a lead. I don't care what you are, but just you're not. You were pointless. I felt nothing for you.
Exactly.
As good as your acting can be.
Exactly.
I just felt nothing for you.
Yeah.
And the most interesting bad guy in the movie for me was Snoke. The origins of him, he's a bit of a mystery.
That's another
He's
thing.
supposed to be an all-powerful
Yeah.
bad guy, and he's killed off.
Exactly. And
like,
here's...
in a really meaningless way.
Here's my problems. It's like, I didn't like Snoke. I thought he was a terrible character. I didn't like a lot of the stuff in Force Awakens. But if you set that up, you're going to have to, pull that through the trilogies. And Rian Johnson, made this movie as a reaction to The Force Awakens, where he kills off Snoke and says, you're not getting any explanation to who this is. And so Force Awakens become even more pointless than it already was.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
Yeah,
I should say.
exactly.
Because there was a lot of mystery regarding Snoke's sort of origin. Like, Kylo found him in some old forgotten Sith cave.
Yeah.
I want to know more about that.
Yeah, they don't even drop hints through the dialogue. It's just literally he's there and then he gets killed.
Yeah, he's the new boss now. We don't know anything about him.
And so
he's put out of a cave, but he is supreme
So
leader.
this movie,
He's the best of all time.
This trilogy of movies is going to be so inconsistent and isn't really going to lead anywhere, because we've got the first movie not really setting anything up. The second movie
Not really setting anything up.
deliberately ignoring those things and trying to do other things. And then the third movie, I'm assuming Abrams is going to come back and try and do whatever he's going to do. And so at the end of it all, it's going to be this weird, disjointed thing where it's nothing really happens.
20 years from now, this is going to be the new prequels. People are just going to not watch these trilogy movies because nothing happens.
People don't want to admit it, but these movies are as bad as the prequels. They might be different for different
They're
reasons.
worse than the
They
prequels,
might be
James.
worse.
They're worse than the prequels. I'm sorry.
They might be as bad for different reasons, but they're still as
Phantom
bad.
Menace is okay. I know how much you hate it, and I get that, but it is at least a watchable film.
It has some good set
Has some good
pieces.
set
Yeah,
pieces.
Matt and I were talking off off before the show, and we're saying the Phantom Menace. The story makes no sense.
Yeah.
but it's a movie of good set pieces.
When they cut in Canto Bight in the casino, when they cut to the racetrack, I thought they were going to have pod
races,
race.
yeah.
And I was like, I hate this movie, but at least pod races are cool.
Yeah.
Nintendo 64.
And it wasn't even that.
not the movie version. The Nintendo 64.
The fan backlash with this film has shocked me.
Callum, we wanted to talk also about the critics. Are giving this movie top marks.
Even
10 or what?
Yeah.
Even Mark Commode, who I thought Mark Commode was like,
Exactly.
I trust Mark Commode, but he said he didn't like the casino scene, but the rest of the film was wonderful.
Great. And I think this is where I get confused. It's like people who don't generally like Star Wars like these new movies. And I think it's because for them, it's just like throwing everything out and it's like, here's a superhero movie.
It's a Marvel movie.
For them, it's like going to see Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever, you know? So the critics are like, oh, this is great, this is fun, you know? They don't really think about it more. And it's like, well, these are, like I said, these are reboots, they're not sequels. And they all, not only that, but they seem to be ignoring the faults within the movie itself, like the editing problems and then the pacing.
People
and the
don't want to come to the table and say, I like the film, but...
Exactly.
You know, there's no room for leeway.
Then there's like the fans or the viewer base who seem to be very divided on the film, whereas the critics all seem to love the film. Which there's been rumors they're being paid off by Disney, but I don't think that's.
So you get the program.
I think that's But I think then there's like the audience. Then there's audience ratings which are much more divided. And I think there's a reason for that. I think the people who did really like Force Awakens liked it on the condition that The Last Jedi was going to further the things set up in that movie, because that movie is not a movie. It doesn't really do anything with its story.
It's 2 hours of just nothing.
Yeah, so it's like people like that movie because they thought The Last Jedi was going to answer the questions, and when it didn't, now they don't like The Last Jedi. But it's like then there's people like me who's like they hated The Force Awakens, and The Last Jedi is just another problem connected to this whole new Disney line of movies.
I know you've touched on before, but this movie had that many irrelevant characters, like you've mentioned before. Like who was the lady that was somehow like
Admiral Holder? Oh my god, we have to talk about her now. Laura Dern. Like I love Laura Dern. Amazing. I was like, yay. She's got this weird purple hair. Doesn't look like Star Wars. She got this boring dress. Doesn't look like Star Wars. Whatever. She just appears after Leia gets put in a coma for pretty much the whole movie, and says I'm second in command, which means I'm the boss now. And I'm like, well, maybe you should have set up her during the big fight scene, so at least you get a bit of sense of her character. But no. Then she kind of pretty much replaces Leia, who we should be spending a lot of time with, because we need to be spending time with her. And now that Carrie Fisher's gone, it's like even more precious time that was lost. And so we're with this character and Poe's like, so what's the plan? How are we going to get away from this really slow car chase? and she's like, you know what? Shh. And Poe's like, no, we need a plan, And she's like, no, shh.
Yep.
And he's like, no, it's like, shh.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is this? Why don't you just tell him the plan? If she just told him the plan, he wouldn't have sent Finn and Rose on that stupid Harry Potter prequel episode, and
like I said,
he wouldn't have brought Benicio del Toro's character back to betray them and get everyone killed. And then people are like, oh well, the movie's actually about failure, and Poe has to learn. And I'm just like,
no.
The only thing failing is the Star Wars saga.
The movie's failing to present that, and also like, why don't you make the movie about him going on a secret mission to destroy something or whatever? And then that be about, and it's also the movie's beating you over the head with it, because then Yoda shows up. The whole movie they're saying kill the past, let the past die, let's move on. And next minute Yoda shows up.
I laughed when I saw that. I'm like, oh my god, they haven't done this, have they?
And he goes, oh, Luke, it's good to fail. And I'm like, oh my god, they're just beating me over the head with this at the moment. And I was just like, what the hell is this? Like, Luke couldn't come to any realization himself. He needed a Force ghost to come.
And they could have had this is a missed opportunity too. So Leia's in like a coma, or she's recovering all this time.
Yeah.
And Luke, I imagine he's, the way his Force powers are, there could have been some sort of mind link sort of character-driven scenes between him and Leia.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Like that sort of mental connection.
He doesn't even get to see Leia until the end, when he's technically not even there.
And the thing is, if they could say, "Oh, I know he's gone,"
Yeah.
and stuff like that, why can't they just do that in the first place?
Exactly.
It's beyond me.
The connection sort of with the Force exists because Rey and Kylo have it.
Yeah.
So why couldn't Luke
Leia,
do
yeah.
that with
Yeah.
him and Leia?
I mean,
that would. Wait, hold on. If they did that, Force Awakens was a meaningless movie.
But
that's the problem. That's the
But then
Where's
Snoke
Luke?
was like-
Where's Luke?
Snoke was like, "Oh, I forced you guys together."
Yeah.
I'm like, this is.
Oh no, I think he's a
What?
liar. Actually, I just want to point that out. I think he was lying about
see-
creating that connection.
But see, and like people are saying, when Rey's parents are revealed to be nobodies, which I thought was probably the best.
That's what I love the most.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, well, now it's like people aren't satisfied with that, and now people are like, well, J.J. Abrams is going to come and actually, he retcon that, and I'm like, these movies are all going to be fighting each other within the same trilogy, and it's like. It does, in the original movies were directed by different people, but you had that sense of, that consistency,
Coherence.
and that build up from the original. Whereas these movies are fighting each other, going back and forth.
I think that Disney are aware of that, and that could be why they gave Ryan Johnson 3 films.
I don't think so. I think they're just like want more money.
I think we just have to apologize to George.
No, I'm still not. The prequels are still bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not defending the prequels. They're still beyond terrible. I'm just saying these movies are just as bad.
And they're
we
worse,
shouldn't-
James.
we shouldn't
They're
be-
worse.
We shouldn't be defending. Anyway, so then Luke, Luke spends the whole movie on the island, being a grumpy old man, not wanting to train Rey.
The milk scene was pretty funny.
Yeah, I didn't mind it.
I feel like
yeah.
I feel like there's too many jokes.
I'll agree with that.
Like there's too many jokes just on the island itself, and there's too many creatures and critters. Like the whole first half of the movie, on the island, the whole first part of the bit on the island, there's porgs everywhere going, really annoying. Even when Luke is trying to teach Rey things, they're in the background squawking, and I'm like, I think Ryan Johnson is like giving me the finger. He's like, all this Force stuff, screw that. Let's have porgs.
Yeah.
And then they had those ET aliens
and then it's like
dressed as nuns.
and then it's like,
what does it say about space Christianity now?
Then I was like, where were those nuns at the start? Like, were they just hiding the whole movie?
Dude.
Like, where did they come from? Like, why are they even there? Like, if Luke is supposed to be hiding on this deserted island, why are there so many creatures and critters there?
It's making me mad.
Porgs are the worst because they don't really serve a plot function.
Exactly.
Their whole function is merchandise. Don't be surprised if next year you see plushie dolls.
It's like I said, people are like, oh, they're not that bad, they're not in the movie. But it's like, they get onto the Millennium Falcon, they start messing with things. It becomes the Gremlins, where they're like wearing things on their head and tearing out wires and stuff. And Chewbacca's like trying to fight them off.
Chewbacca wasn't even needed in this film.
And then at the end of the movie, when Chewie's flying the Millennium Falcon fighting the First Order, the porgs are like flipping and flying around the cockpit, and I'm just like, this is the worst thing ever.
It's that Disney factor. It's made for kids.
On the bright side, Leia did actually. She was nice to Chewbacca in this film, which is a step in.
Yeah.
In terms of calculation,
She
it's a
didn't
step in the right
completely
direction.
ignore him.
But having said that, like, it just
Anyway, so
pointless.
we haven't got very much time left, so we'll quickly talk about Luke projects himself like a two-pack hologram.
two-pack hologram.
And he concentrates so hard that he pretty much farts himself to death and turns into a Force Ghost. Which again, it's like you're wasting Luke. We didn't see him in Force Awakens. Now you're wasting him in this movie. And now in the next movie, I guess he's going to be a Force Ghost who comes up a couple times. It's like, well, we really needed him in the first movie, and then if he died in the second movie, it would have made more sense because but really we're just setting him up as this terrible, ugly character who hates the Force and hates everyone. Who wanted to kill Kylo, like he's a murderer now. And then there's these other problems of now Ryan Johnson is reaffirming the prequels by kind of saying that. The Jedi did suck. That they allowed Darth Sidious to come to power. They turned Anakin to the dark side and created the Empire. And I'm like, Ryan, let the prequels go. You keep saying yourself, let the past die. The prequels suck. No one liked them. No one wants to talk about them. Disney even itself is sort of trying to shift away from them.
Yeah.
But Ryan Johnson's like, no, actually, the Jedis did suck. Everything we saw in the prequels happened, and now Luke is kind of trying to deal with that. I'm like, no, Ryan, ignore the prequels.
Sure.
Take the original trilogy. But then Ryan Johnson's like, no, the original trilogy, let's demythologize it. And I'm like, you can't deconstruct a movie in the sequel when the first movie was a nostalgia trip, and also when your third movie isn't going to be written or directed by you don't know how it's going to go, and really it's not a sequel. Again, it's a reboot, and it's like. It's kind of like, again, it's a space fantasy. Why are we deconstructing it? Why are we talking about fuel and light speed and politics? Yeah,
is an all-time
exactly.
high.
Yeah. Why are we talking about the politics? Why are we talking about the politics of the Jedi when we should be telling the story about the world and the story and the characters? We should be telling about, you know, where Luke took the Jedi after. We don't want to be bogged down in this middle of this trilogy talking about how much the Jedi suck. Like, what the hell is he thinking?
That is a big middle finger,
and a lot of critics are like, oh, this is why we like it so much. It's taking the original trilogy, you know, and de-mythologizing,
subverting it.
Yeah, and I'm like, this sounds like what Zack Snyder was saying about Superman, you know, like, oh, you know, let's de-mythologize this great character that everyone loves, but also at the same time we have to show how awesome Superman is. And then this happens in this movie as well. Rian Johnson's like, you know, the Jedi suck, but look how powerful every Jedi in this movie is. And look, he gets blasted by lasers, but he's okay. Oh my god! Oh, look how cool this is. I'm like,
you know,
Ryan, what are you doing?
That's a big problem with how the movie ended for me as well. Because there's no more teaching figures in this film.
Yeah,
Snoke's dead for some reason. That apparently Snoke doesn't matter anymore. Which I didn't like. Snoke was always a. I mean,
I hated Snoke. I'm kind of glad he's dead. But again, like I said, like
he was a mediocre character. For
makes
me.
Force Awakens even more pointless.
He was a mediocre character for me, but now he's even less important because he apparently. Such a powerful figure doesn't even know that his lightsaber is being tampered with.
Yeah, and we still don't know where this universe is at. Like,
and Luke died.
The opening crawl says the First Order is taking over the galaxy, but I'm like, we don't see any of that. Why wasn't that the plot? Or instead of the Resistance doing the slow car chase, why wasn't the Resistance trying to kind of block off the First Order from, you know, taking over all the planets? Like, we don't see any of that. There's no world building in these movies.
And it's a reboot. At the end of the day, it just reboots the universe for J.J. Abrams.
After the movie finished, Callum, you said you came to me and you're like, I can't believe they rebooted it again. Like in Force Awakens, they reboot it so that everything's the same as it was at the start of the original trilogy. This movie reboots it again, so it's the same as it was before the Force Awakens.
There are no stakes anymore.
And before, it's like it's like they're all ignoring each other, all contradicting each other, and there's no stakes, no tension.
Quick question. I know it's a bit technical with the film.
Yeah.
But Luke only did teach her two things, right? On the two rules.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because there was three, he said, and he didn't get to the third one.
I can't remember the third one, but the first one was the Force is for everyone, the Jedi suck.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, that's fair enough. You want to teach, you know, the Force should be everyone. I'm like, why didn't he just start a school where the Force was for everyone? Why is he being such a dick about it? I can't remember the second rule.
It doesn't matter.
No, because he said there was three, but he only demonstrated two.
Yeah. But anyway, then Rey runs off and takes the Jedi ancient books with her. So it's like, really all she needed was those books. Luke could have been killed off at the start of the movie and she could have just taken the books and read through them and said, I can learn kung fu from looking at the pictures of the...
I just felt the biggest middle finger to us was when he looks at the lightsaber when he's given it and just throws it. I'm just like,
I think
that is just...
that kind of signals to you Rian Johnson doesn't care about Star Wars. He doesn't. I think he likes Star Wars. I think he cares about, but he doesn't care what you think about Star Wars. Yeah. We're out of time. I'll say this quote sort of to lead into the next episode. Unfortunately, next Tuesday is Boxing Day, so I probably won't be on air, which sucks because I really wanted to talk more about The Last Jedi. But keep an eye on the Man vs. Movies Facebook page, and the week after we'll be back talking probably more Last Jedi. But I'll leave you with a quote from Mark Hamill that maybe we'll try to pick up next week. Mark Hamill told Rian Johnson after reading the script for the film, I pretty much fundamentally disagree with every choice you've made for this character. Now, having said that, I have gotten that off my chest, and my job is now to take what you've created and do my best to realize your vision. So, you know, even Mark Hamill realized that this isn't the version of Luke that he would have done. This isn't the version of Luke that fans probably would have wanted. But as an actor, he said, you're the director, I'll do what you want. And I think Mark Hamill did a good job, but it's just the character went in the complete wrong direction, and we'll try to talk about that next week.
Just before we end up, I had mates that aren't like massive Star Wars fans wanting to walk out of that film.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is not even fun. Like, this is, like, as you guys mentioned before, it's like, DC, yada, yada, yada.
Exactly.
But this was so bad to the point where people wanted to walk out, and that just says it all. It's how boring Midway is.
It's a soul-crushing movie. Yeah, so we're out of time. Thank you very much, Callum, Nathan, and Matt, for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys always coming in and listen to me rant and yell at you. And also thank you to the audience. I don't think I have any listeners left. I just do this for myself at this point. But if you are out there, thank you very, very much. Please like and share the Man vs. Movies Facebook page. Please rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes to the Man vs. Movies podcast. And also, probably won't be on next week, but, keep an eye on that for Man vs. Movies Facebook page, and keep an eye out for the week after for another episode. If you're listening live to the radio, stay tuned, because Matt's show Car Talk's up next, and we're going to be talking about Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company, so I think that'll be a really good episode. Matt, plug your show.
It's Car Talk with Matty J. It's 7 p.m. on a Tuesday night, right after your show, James. Like and share our Facebook page. It's Car Talk, TORQUE, with Matty J. We're also on iTunes and on Shout Engine, so get listening.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm trying to figure out if I should say anything else.
Recommend a Christmas movie?
Oh, yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Merry Christmas. Hope everyone has a safe New Year. Yeah, thanks a lot for listening. May the force be with you.
National Olympics. Christmas vacation.
And also with you.
Hey, I'll do the sign of the cross.
We give our force
what else? No, I watched Die Hard Christmas Eve, and then I watched Jingle All the Way Christmas morning every year.
Did you watch El Camino Christmas?
No, I'm going to watch it tomorrow, hopefully.
It got terrible reviews.
Yeah.
But it's pretty good.
It's a banger.
I'll check it out, and maybe we'll talk about it a bit next episode.
In a few weeks, after we've got Star Wars off our chest.
Thank you, everyone, again, and catch you later. You're listening to Man vs. Movies, live here on 98.9 Northwest FM. I'm your host, James, and on tonight's show, I'll be continuing my review of Star Wars The Last Jedi. I'm joined again in the studio by my good friends Callum and Nathan. How you going, guys?
Pretty good, thank you.
Yeah, good.
So... Last week I wasn't in studio, unfortunately.
Welcome to the new year.
Yes.
Hope all the listeners had a good Christmas. And had a good New Year.
Hope everyone got the presents they wanted from Santa, and had a good, safe New Year. Last week, unfortunately, I wasn't in studio, which sucks because I haven't missed a show so far. So
damn families.
Yeah, and I was really kind of itching to kind of continue the talk about Last Jedi, because there's so much stuff that I wanted to get into. Eventually, I'll return to my regular reviews, but it's just, I think I don't have enough time in the studio. Like, I only get 1 hour per week, so it's kind of like I have to split things up. Ideally, I'd have a podcast where I could just go for 2 or 3 hours.
I mean, with this film, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, and ideally I would have just done, one big episode about Last Jedi and then moved on. But unfortunately, I don't have that luxury. Hopefully this year I will get a podcast started so I can do more specials and stuff like that. But I don't know when that's going to happen. But I appreciate the people who are listening. Every time I do a Star Wars episode, I do get a lot of feedback. That's kind of where my feedback really comes from. So it's kind of, even though I really complain and yell and rant about Star Wars, that's where people seem to be getting their engagement from. So I'm happy that
it's the big movies.
Yeah, and I really appreciate any of the listeners who continue to listen to my rants. Like I said, this is the continuing review of Last Jedi, so this is part 2. And if you haven't heard part 1, you should go back and download the podcast from iTunes, Shout Engine, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So this is part 2 of the Last Jedi review. I guess I should do a major spoiler warning again, just in case people haven't seen it. But we'll be talking a lot about the details of Last Jedi and the other Star Wars movies. So this is a really big spoiler warning if you haven't seen it. So last week... last episode, I ended the show with a quote from Mark Hamill where he said he fundamentally disagreed with what Rian Johnson was doing with Luke's character, but as an actor it was up to him to bring that vision to the screen. Since then, Mark Hamill has sort of apologized for the statement and said that, at first he didn't, really understand, but as an actor, he took that role and he went with it and he ended up, enjoying the role. I understand, he didn't want... It's unfair that people used that statement as ammunition against the movie. I did it myself.
It was probably never meant to be that public of a statement.
But I feel like his frustrations with where Luke went as a character were indicative of a lot of Star Wars fans' frustrations with where Luke went as a character.
Because he comes out and says he doesn't mean it, doesn't make it not true.
Yeah, and you know, since then I've been really unpacking, you know, his other statements, and he definitely holds Luke very dear to himself. And you can definitely see, not just through that statement, but a lot of his other interviews where he definitely wasn't 100% on board with Rian Johnson. He may have changed his mind, but yeah, I mean, I guess it's unfair. Like, I don't want to say Mark Hamill says it sucks, so that means it sucks. I'm just saying, like, I feel like his reservations about the character are our reservations as well, and I think, you know,
he reflects our opinions
exactly, and who knows the character better than him? And as I'll do now, we'll sort of explore why the character doesn't work and why I think Mark Hamill's initial reservations were justified, and how I think he still maybe was just being diplomatic when he said, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way." So I think Luke's portrayal, spoiler warning, just in case. Luke's portrayal and death in The Last Jedi nullifies the ending of Return the Jedi by sort of, Return the Jedi is a victory for the rebellion, for the underdog against, the overlords. Of course, they didn't defeat all the Empire. We know, they had a long struggle ahead of them. But I think what the ending of Return the Jedi symbolizes is that there's hope at the end. And I feel like Last Jedi kind of throws that down the toilet in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's sort of that. It's sort of like, as you said, Return of the Jedi is like, the sort of like good wins over evil, and sort of keep hope alive, and like, the Jedis will prevail eventually.
I feel like, if The Force Awakens was a reboot of the physical universe, replacing the Republic with the Resistance, who are the Rebellion, and, replacing the Empire with the First Order, and sort of destroying all the Republic planets so that the Resistance were small and the First Order's big, and sort of if the Force Awakens returned the universe to how it was at the start of A New Hope, then The Last Jedi is kind of an emotional reboot, if that makes sense. It kind of reboots the emotional and moral victory that the rebels have at the end of the original trilogy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're back where we started, essentially, from A New Hope. It's like like the world's being oppressed.
But whereas The Force Awakens was so nostalgic and, oh my God, Luke is so great, and oh my God, Star Wars, but it kind of reverted the universe back to how it was. But The Last Jedi kind of goes, the ending of Return of the Jedi, that was false hope. It's kind of I feel like Rian Johnson's giving everyone a middle finger. Like the original trilogy. He's kind of like, the original trilogy wasn't that bastion of hope that you thought it was.
Yeah, it's Luke had a victory 30 years ago.
Yeah,
and now we're back.
He's a grumpy old man.
Hundreds of planets have been destroyed.
Yeah. On that point, I did a quick search for the interview I'm about to reference, and I couldn't find it because it was quite a few weeks ago now.
Okay, yeah.
But Rian Johnson said that he feels the negative reception the film got from some fans was because they weren't comfortable with him taking Star Wars and demythologizing it and deconstructing it for future generations. And I read that article and I said to myself, obviously, why is that necessary? Yeah. Why do we need to completely change the shape of an IP for future people to enjoy it? Why is that necessary?
This is one thing I wanted to discuss is, like, I think I mentioned it, in last episode, like, why did he feel like he had to spend the middle of this new trilogy demythologizing and talking about how much the Jedi suck, and talking about, and kind of reaffirming the prequels and legitimizing them? It's like, why did he feel like he had to do that? You can make a new set of characters in the Star Wars universe without giving a middle finger to the original trilogy.
Yeah, it's difficult because it's like they hired him maybe without knowing how he felt about Star Wars.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, they let him write it and they approved of what he wrote and what he directed. So it's kind of like,
because I wonder if JJ approves.
See,
because he's like, I feel like he would be on the opposite end of the spectrum almost.
Yeah,
like this sort of he would more build upon that mythology since he was such a.
This is another problem with the whole new Disney in movies, is that J.J. Abrams didn't know what he was doing when he set up those. He admitted he didn't have any idea what
The mystery box.
Yeah, he set up, who's Rey's parents, where did the blue lightsaber come from, who's Snoke.
Yeah, and
he actually admitted he had no idea where any of that was going.
And now we have the major problem of getting someone else.
Exactly, and then he stepped away. He had no involvement in The Last Jedi.
He should have wrote the whole trilogy, realistically.
I mean, I like I said, I don't like J.J. Abrams' films. I don't think his version of The Last Jedi would have been good, but at least he would have been consistent, and he would have taken what he set up and kind of paid it off.
9 hours,
Ryan Johnson didn't do.
And on that point, 9 hours ago, I think, at least the one I read was 9 hours ago, there was an article that said Ryan Johnson said Rey's parentage is still open for discussion.
Yeah,
so
see?
he's not tying up. It seems that
we're going to get another reset.
Yeah,
this is
it
what
seems
I said.
that what happened in The Last Jedi is malleable. So J.J. Abrams can come along and retcon
This is what
some
I
of the
said
decisions
last
made
week.
in Last Jedi.
This is what I said last episode. Like, all these movies are going to be fighting each other. It's like, no, he said, she said, no, yes, no,
It'll be future fans will pick one and they'll stick to it.
Yeah, exactly. Duck season, rabbit season, duck season. Like, every movie will be fighting each other. And, again, why did Ryan Johnson choose to de-mythologize the trilogy if, one, The Force Awakens was a nostalgia trip, and two, the next movie wasn't going to be written or directed by him?
I mean, look, we don't know how much he consulted with JJ on story points.
Apparently not much, if at all.
Because I would say that's...
Like, I think J.J. Abrams was available. Like, he didn't shut himself off or anything.
No, but
as far as I know, from what I've read and from the interviews I've seen with Ryan Johnson, J.J. Abrams, handed it off to Ryan Johnson, and Ryan Johnson just went with it.
I would just say it's almost disrespectful. Because, like, you've got all this writing that JJ put down, and then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to do what I want with it.
I think
J.J.
Abrams,
everything that you started in
I think one of the problems is J.J. Abrams chose to step away because it was taking so much time away from his family and stuff. And that's understandable, but it's like, I feel like he should... J.J. Abrams, as much as I don't think he would have done a good job, like, he should have been the George Lucas. He should have been coming in and saying, can I look at the story? Can I give you notes on where this is going?
Yeah, or LucasArts or Disney should have at least got him to put down the broader strokes of the
Exactly,
story.
yeah. And this is a problem. Like, one of the major problems with Last Jedi is The Force Awakens, The Force Awakens is to blame for a lot of the problems we're talking about. We'll go back to Luke. So I feel like, they make him this grumpy old man, and, he's cynical and he's given up hope about the Jedi. He wants the Jedi to end. But also...
Too many weird alien nuns.
Exactly. There's too many... And that's exactly what I was going to say. There's too many jokes. If he's this cynical old man who's given up...
He's been stuck with the Borg too long. He can't take it anymore.
Like, why is there so many jokes surrounding him? And, he does these really self-aware things, like brush off his shoulder after getting blasted by... And it's just like, it's so self-aware and so...
it's too Disney.
It's too Disney. It's too Marvel. It borders on parody.
Yeah, it's like, I think I've said it before, it's like we were watching Spaceballs. Like,
Exactly.
a really, really serious
There's a bit,
Spaceballs.
oh my God, there's a bit where I wanted to tear my hair out, where there's a spaceship and it's like slowly coming down to land, and it looks like a steam iron, and I'm like, that ship looks like a steam iron, and then it cuts back and it is a robot ironing a uniform, and I was like, kill me now. Like, this is just Spaceballs, like... Star Wars has become self-parody because Star Wars is so successful and has become this cultural icon and phenomenon that, there's been so many rip-offs and prequels and sequels and what do you call it, homages and all this stuff. And it's like, well, now when you make a Star Wars movie, it's a Star Wars movie in which Star Wars movie exist, where the characters know about Star Wars, and it becomes parody. It's ridiculous.
The fourth wall is not quite broken.
Exactly.
But you're aware, all the characters know that the wall is there.
Yeah.
They're just not breaking it.
Yeah. I feel like also Luke doesn't really do anything. He spends the whole movie on the island complaining about how much the Jedi suck. Rey tries to convince him to come back, but it doesn't really work. Then she leaves. And it's like... He doesn't
That's
really...
not in character with the Luke we know.
Exactly, and
look, he never would have left. He never would have gone off by himself.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing: like, Mark Hamill is quoted as saying more than once, "A Jedi would never give up." Luke was the most optimistic character in the original trilogy, so Ryan Johnson kind of flipped that on its head. He subverted that, and people are like, that's why we like it. It's different. It's new. You know, it's taking, you know, it's de-mythologizing. I'm like, but he didn't do anything after that. He subverted it, and then Luke just kind of dies. And I'm like...
It makes you wonder why they even decided to give the film the title The Last Jedi.
Yeah, and even at the end, Luke says, I'm not the last Jedi. You know, Rey's the last Jedi. Rey's the next Jedi, I should say.
Yeah, and we're led to believe that she's going to start a new Jedi school.
I guess so. And then it's like, why...
And there's
why
kids that are forced... Now, hold on, another question we have with this movie now. Are they turning it on its head now? Because... what I thought was established Star Wars canon was that you were either force sensitive or you're not.
Yeah.
But in this movie, they're sort of playing with the idea that the question is, can everybody be taught?
I feel like that's not a problem I have, you know. But I feel like the way Rian Johnson goes about it is the problem. Is where he, like I said in the last episode, he thinks it's the mutant gene, where it kind of it awakens out of you.
Because this is the prequel trilogy, so you know, hold whatever you will out of that. But it's like, if they weren't started to be taught how to use the Force by a certain age, then
here's the problem. The prequels for me are such a bastardization of what the Force is. You know, midichlorians and having to train little children from babies with lightsabers and in literal classrooms. It's such a weird, ridiculous thing that George Lucas did. And I think Rian Johnson almost takes that and then kind of goes, yeah, there's that, but also it's for everyone. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, for everyone,
they contradict each other.
Yeah, and then I'm like, I think it's cool. You know, Luke, it would have been cool if Luke said, you know, there are no more Jedi, there are no more Sith, but there are Force-sensitive people who I'm going to train as a new, kind of like a new age Jedis. You know? They're not called Jedis, but they are. And I feel like he went about that in the wrong way by having Luke say, all this stuff sucks, I'm going to burn it all to the ground.
Yeah, or even explain it away as saying, you know, Luke saying something like, I sense more Force-sensitive people, like it's not as uncommon now as it once was. The Force is awakening.
See, but that's the thing. It's like, why was the Force awakening? Yeah. The Force is a force.
It's a fundamental force.
That's in everything, that surrounds everything, that's between everything.
It can't go to sleep.
It doesn't go to sleep, and it doesn't awaken. It's there all the time. Just because there are people who aren't using it doesn't mean it's not there. And I think that's, there's a problem with The Force Awakens is there's this weird idea that the Force was dormant, and then when Rey heard the word Force, it came out of her. And then The Last Jedi kind of takes that and goes, well, now that there's this hope again, that, you know, there's a little kids who are going to take it. And I'm just like, why is the Force... I don't understand what he's going for. Like, yes, the kids could have... It's like, but why does it have to be this dormant thing?
And how did they learn the Force pull?
Exactly. Why does that kid know?
Has the Force become some innate knowledge now?
That's what I'm saying. He thinks it's the mutant gene. He thinks it just kind of comes out of you at a certain point.
And it's these contradictions in movies that's going to end up like tearing the Star Wars movies on the universe apart.
That's why I don't understand why people are so happy to defend it and say it's such a great movie. When you look at, I mean, I think I said this on the last episode probably, but the Force is very difficult for Luke to learn in the original trilogy. And so you have people like Rey and the child at the end of The Last Jedi who can just apparently use it at will without any knowledge.
It ties into the whole thing of like Luke's progression of his character. He starts off not being able to use the Force, but Obi-Wan teaches him with the blast shield on his helmet when the remote droid. It's like, if you reach out with your feelings, you can sense things around you. Okay. Then later in the film, he uses the Force for the first time to shoot the torpedoes into the Death Star. And that's kind of his first big, act of using the Force. Then in the second movie, which is set, 2 or 3 years later, we see him use the Force pull for the first time. And it's really hard for him to get that lightsaber out of the snow. And that's progression of his character until, and then he trains with Yoda, and then the big fight with Darth Vader at the end, he uses all these flips and these different things. And it's like there's a progression to his character until at the end of Return of the Jedi, he overpowers Darth Vader.
Yeah, and now it's like we're almost stuck with chaos in the canon.
And it's kind of like and The Force Awakens has kind of removed all that struggle because we've seen it so much. And it's just like now Rey is just automatically the most powerful Jedi at the start of the film. It's like they got rid of all the struggle, all the tension. And like I said in the last episode, like all the characters are now super powerful. All the Force sensitive characters.
And the thing is, we don't even see any Force abilities from Rey up until that one point where it flips like a switch.
Yeah, exactly.
And she can use it, and she has it.
Yeah,
She knows all about
There's
it.
no learning curve.
Yeah, and it's not even about, what does the prequel say, what does the original trilogy say. It's kind of like, where's the struggle? Where's the tension? Where's the character growth? It's not there because these movies are poorly written. I guess we've gotten a little off track.
Back to Luke.
Yeah, back to Luke. So
Sorry, everyone.
yeah, so Kylo burns the Jedi Temple in a flashback, which looks like stock footage from Force Awakens. They didn't do any extra kind of flashbacks or dream sequences there. You didn't get to see any of the students or the Knights of Ren. Where are the Knights of Ren? This is the second movie.
They should have got J.J. to write the second movie.
This is the
obviously
second movie. We still haven't seen the Knights of Ren.
we're not gonna see 'em.
Are you telling me the third movie is going to introduce the Knights of Ren?
If
And
JJ's
what were
running
they
it-
doing this whole time? Just
They'll be
hanging
introduced.
around?
They'll be introduced in the comics.
Yeah, exactly. This is the problem with this.
Because Ryan Johnson probably wrote the movie and he's like, nah, I don't like the Knights of Ren.
Maybe
It's
he
like,
forgot about them.
erase them.
See, he wrote this into the movie, and then he's like, "Oh, I don't know what they're going to do with them." And then Ryan Johnson was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't care about them. I'm going to ignore them." And then the third movie, it's like, "Well, do we have to put him in now, or should we just ignore?" They'll probably kill him. They'll introduce him, kill him off, like a lot of the other dumb characters.
They'll deal with that in the crawl.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Knights of Ren all fell down the stairs at the same time. Anyway, so yeah, Kylo burns the temple. Where was that movie? I want to see that movie. You know, if these movies are supposed to be, if the Rian Johnson wanted to make a movie about failure, why wasn't it about Luke training this new Jedi and having a student turn to the dark side and him having to deal with that?
Because that would be a good starting point. That's
Exactly.
what we got.
Also, like when Luke is telling Rey what happened to make Kylo turn to the dark side, he says that Snoke had already turned Kylo's heart, and that there was he could sense no light in him. And that he was going to, he could see all the murderous things Kylo was going to do. And that's why he crept up on him and was going to kill him. Which is so weird and dirty. And and it's like, I'm not saying, I'm not saying Luke can't have flaws. I'm not saying these heroes can't have flaws. But Rian Johnson's taking these people who, were the heroes of the universe and really cutting them down, and being like, these guys are the worst. He's not just saying they have flaws. He's like, this Luke is an asshole,
It's Luke's now going to kill a kid in his bed
exactly
during the middle of the night because he don't think he can save him.
Also, this was the guy who saw one little bit of light in his father, Darth Vader, and refused to kill him.
That's an excellent point.
Which is this is one of the reasons Return of the Jedi is my favorite of the Star Wars movies. I know a lot of people don't like certain aspects of it. It has problems, sure, but one of the reasons it's my favorite is because of that last battle. One, the lightsaber fight's amazing, but just that moment where Darth Vader is on the floor, and he's like breathing really funny, and his hand's cut off, and there's all wires coming out, and Luke kind of looks at his robot hand, and he realizes like, oh crap, I'm turning to the dark side, and he throws his lightsaber away. It says to the Emperor, I'm not going to do it, and that's the moment where Luke won. Even if he died, he was willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good. And that's Luke. Now, Rian Johnson has skipped 30 years and gone, Luke is the opposite of that. Without explaining anything, without explaining that journey. And because these new movies are so bad at world building and character building, we don't get a sense of his progression over those 30 years.
Maybe he just has
all the critics, a lot of the critics who love the film, in their reviews, they all say how the movie is fantastic because of the subversion of what we think Star Wars should be.
Yeah.
But I've never seen anyone accurately defend why the subversion was necessary. Or I'm not against subversion, certainly, but if you're going to subvert something, you should have a good reason, and it should be executed in a well done way.
Yeah, and your character should have an overall arc, whereas Luke is cynical, and then he kind of transport himself to Crate and to distract. And it's kind of like
it seems like,
and then he dies. It's like, well, his character hasn't finished that arc yet.
We know nothing about why he's like he is. For all the audience might know, he might just have seasonal affective disorder, and he needs some sun.
I feel like there's this missing time where there was a trilogy they skipped over. There was a trilogy set between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens.
Luke's transition to the dark side.
Where Luke was training the students and Kylo turned, and that's when Luke started to go down this cynical path. I'm like, where was those movies? We needed those movies because these new Force Awakens, Last Jedi don't really explain that. And I
It
feel
seems like it's just done for the sake of it.
yeah, it's just a way to reboot the series. Like I keep saying, they just skip all the good stuff, just so they can reboot the series and bring in new toys. It's kind of like, you know how I said with Justice League, it feels unearned because Batman v Superman was so dark and brooding, and you know trying to deconstruct Superman and all this stuff, and then Justice League was like, oh no, Superman's awesome. Everyone loves Superman. Even Batman, who tried to kill him, loved Superman. You know, and the whole world who hated Superman loved Superman. And I'm like, wait, did we skip a movie? What's going on? You know, it feels Last Jedi feels like that. It feels like there was a movie or a trilogy that we needed between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens to sort of explain a lot of the stuff. And I heard an interview with Mark Hamill where he says usually, you know, or sometimes at least, a director or a writer will give the actor notes on, you know, where the character's backstory is. Even if it's never said in the film, you know, they'll say, oh, you know, Luke has been here for 30 years and this is why he's the way he is. And Hamill has said that J.J. Abrams gave him no notes and Rian Johnson gave him no notes. So does that mean Rian Johnson and J.J. had no idea where Luke was? Or they just knew where he was and they just refused to tell
I think
Hamill?
they just didn't care. I think for them,
I think so, yeah.
It was as simple as saying, he's old, he's bitter, he's
Yeah.
on this island. It doesn't
But
matter
that's
how
not
he got
enough.
there.
That
Yeah.
subversion is not enough. You have to have the character development. You have to have the world building that ties into all that. You can't just say,
yeah.
he was this way, now he's this way.
It's being
Ha.
edgy. It's being
Yeah.
edgy for edginess'
That's
sake.
why people are like, oh, this is the best Star Wars movie. You know, these new Star Wars movies are so great. You know, they're subverting. I'm like, but they're not doing anything other than that. And then, of course, there's all the problems of how bad, you know, tonally inconsistent the movie is and all the bad special effects and all that stuff. It's like, that's not enough. You can't just do that. Also, like, if there's no light left in Kylo, so that means there's no redemption for him. Like, you have to kill him off. And even when Luke goes to Leia at the end of the movie and he says, like, I can't bring him back. And Leia's just like, I know. And then he goes to confront him. I'm like, so Leia has accepted that Kylo must die. Luke has accepted that Kylo must die. And it becomes this really sick perversion of Star Wars where it's like, we just need to assassinate this guy. So is Episode 9 going to be Rey goes to assassinate the Kylo? There's going to be no...
They say there's no light left in Kylo, but there's a scene in the movie where he doesn't shoot.
Oh, Leia?
Yeah.
True.
He has the option to destroy the ship or whatever, and he just doesn't.
Yeah. But
so that's like a little subtle sort
like,
of nod that maybe he does have light, but then they contradict that later on.
It feels like bad writing because they contradict it so many times where Luke says, I sensed all the bad things he was going to do. I sensed no light, so I was going to murder him in his sleep.
That's very much a dark side way of thinking, don't you think?
Two wrongs don't make a right, Mr. Johnson.
That's a very much of a Sith way of thinking, right? It's like, there's no light in him, he better die.
Again, like I said, it nullifies the Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi was Luke getting so close to going to the dark side, but, you know, pulling back. So now 30 years later, he's doing it again.
He slips in his old age.
Yeah.
Whoops.
It's kind of like, but then it's like, I feel like there's no real arc because now he's dead, and in the next movie, really conceivably, he'll come back as a Force Ghost for a couple of scenes.
With Yoda.
Oh my God. Don't get me started. Well, I've got a whole section on Yoda.
Well, and Anakin, what's his name? The adult actor. The name reminds me off the top of my head.
Wait, which one? The Hayden Christensen one or the original Sebastian Shaw
Hayden
one?
Christensen.
Oh God, I feel like that's something Rian Johnson would do, just as a middle finger.
Just to subvert expectations.
Yeah. So I feel like it's less of an, you know, whereas, you know, from the first Star Wars to Empire Strikes Back to Return of the Jedi, there's a progression of Luke as a character. He gets more battle hardened. He gets a bit darker. He learns things. He becomes less naive. I feel like The Last Jedi is less of an evolution of Luke and more of a complete corruption of his character, just to be edgy, like we were saying, and not to have any point or not to have any arc or redemption, just cause we have to be different.
It's just subversion, so Star Wars can, as Rian Johnson said, and I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, because I can't find the article.
Yeah.
Star Wars needed to change for it to continue to be relevant. That's pretty on the money. It's not what he said exactly, but it was close to those words. I don't think Star Wars had a problem. Like, I feel like...
That's the thing. A lot of people are now saying, well, Last Jedi kind of proves that Star Wars had a problem and Last Jedi was kind of fixing that problem. I'm like, what was that problem?
Yeah,
people love the originals for a reason, you know.
Yeah, even you look at the books. I mean, and I know there are a lot of problems with the books, but the books that came before these new films, they were very much in the tradition of the original series, and they continued very successfully for many years.
I wrote down this whole thing that I was going to talk about, but I didn't know if we'd have time. Let me see if I can find it. People like me who argue that they don't want the movies to be too similar to the originals, but they also don't want to be too different, you know. People who don't understand that, there's a balance you need. Where nostalgia's fine. I mean, I'm all for a couple of references. I'm all for that. But as long as it doesn't override the whole film, which in Force Awakens and Rogue One, and even a little bit in Last Jedi, it kind of gets too much. You know, it becomes just a references and self-parody. The new movies should be the same in tone, feeling, and production design to the original trilogy, but new or different in the story, characters, and locations.
The genre should be the same.
Like the expanded universe, those books took the characters in new directions. They introduced new species, new characters, new storylines, new enemies, new friends. But they looked the same. They felt the same. The characters spoke, the same sort of. It wasn't that complete departure into Marvel slapsticky area, and it also wasn't a complete beat-for-beat remake of one of the original trilogy, which Force Awakens is, and Last Jedi gets pretty close to Empire Strikes Back as well. Also, the new movies do... there's the lack of feeling of the original trilogies in the new movies, and so there's a really... In the new movies, they do a really bad job of creating the new story and characters, but also seem to completely... they have a complete disregard for character development, world building, and expanding on what was seen in the original trilogy. So it's like it's not just about Star Wars. It's about the filmmaking behind it and the storytelling. It's like we should be seeing a world that looks and feels like Star Wars, but has new characters and new ideas and new. What we're getting is this weird superhero movie that doesn't really make sense.
A couple of weeks ago, you asked the question, where are the races from the original movies?
Exactly.
And I thought about that for a second, and I thought, my God.
Yeah, you were so surprised. You're like, there was no Twi'leks.
I said, when I realized, I'm like, there's no Twi'leks, there's no Rodans.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And so I think that speaks to what you're saying, is that they're trying so hard to push Star Wars in a new direction that they're forgetting that there were previous movies with their own alien races, their own ways of doing things.
I know comic books and video games are very different from movies, and I'm not trying to say, it's a one-to-one comparison, but if you read some of the comic books from the 90s and play some of the video games from the 90s, they looked and felt like Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
Like Jedi, Jedi Knight,
Knights of the Old Republic.
Knights of the Old Republic, and Shadows of the Empire, and Dark Forces, and they were really cool. They really had the sound design and the feeling of Star Wars and the production design. And the way people spoke and the languages and the races, the species and all that. But they had new characters and new stories. Crimson Empire is a great comic book where everything looks and feels like Star Wars, but you're telling a new story about one of the Red Guards from, the Emperor's Red Guards. The Thrawn trilogy is probably the most famous example. It's probably the most highly regarded of the expanded universe material. And that's because it feels like Star Wars, but it takes the characters and it evolves. Luke's starting a new school, and Leia's starting the New Republic. And
it's so good that they're keeping aspects of that in the canon.
Exactly, but I feel like the new movies don't do a good job of that at all. They completely throw everything out the window. They're like, wipe the slate clean. We're going to start again. It's a reboot, but here's all the nostalgia stuff. And I feel like the new movies are. It's for people to have the ability to watch Star Wars without actually watching Star Wars. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So people who don't want to chuck in the original trilogy can watch these new movies, whether it be with their kids or on their own or with their friends. It's like, but really, they all they want is the references to Yoda. They don't want to watch Empire Strikes Back and have to watch the Yoda scenes. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I feel like we've said this time and time again on this show when we're talking about Star Wars. It's a Marvel hero movie with Star Wars characters.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it's
a superhero
that,
movie.
again though, that leads into the larger discussion of films today and what gets released today, because Disney's like, yeah, sure, we'll make a Star Wars movie,
but
it has to do well at the box
it has
office.
to tick all the points.
And it has to,
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's good as long as it makes money. It doesn't matter if it's Star Wars as long as it makes money.
The original Star Wars movies weren't necessarily for children. And I say that in the sense that there was no in A New Hope.
I feel like people say, oh well, George Lucas says they are for kids, and you can tell they're for kids. I'm like,
no,
not really.
Well, honestly, maybe, but
it's a genre.
Keep in mind also, this is the late 70s, early 80s. Kids movies are a lot different now than they were back then.
I was right to say
Gremlins is a kids movie. That's violent and dark and creepy.
There's
and
a
weird,
genre of movies that we don't get today called family movies.
Yeah.
No, there should be something for everybody, and we don't really, aside from the Pixar movies.
Think about like the original Star Wars. It's pretty lighthearted, but like Obi-Wan chops a guy's arm off, and there's all blood everywhere. And I'm like, this is the late 70s. This is what kids movies were. This is when PG meant you could have blood and
you needed
a bit of
you needed a
swearing
parent to make sure it wasn't inappropriate.
Yeah, and it's kind of like now PG means just really kids stuff. Like PG has become G, PG-13 has become PG, and R has become
M.
I'm mixing up the American and the. You get my point. Like movies have changed from the 70s and 80s to now.
My point is that the original Star Wars movie didn't need CG screaming opera alien singers.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was kid friendly because it was a story about courage. It was a story about hope.
It was the hero's journey.
It was the romance, as you said.
Exactly.
And this film,
people still don't understand. Star Wars is just Flash Gordon. Like, that's what George Lucas was going for.
It's a spaghetti western in space.
Pretty much,
it's Flash Gordon.
It's a pirate movie. It's a medieval movie.
They need to make this new franchise child friendly, so they throw in all the inappropriate slapstick stuff and all this business, and it just feels wrong.
One or two is fine. There's little funny aliens in the original trilogy too, but they don't override the whole movie.
The comedic elements of this film, like when Poe's like, "Am I holding?"
Yeah, there's a your mama joke in the first 5 minutes of the Last Jedi. Are you kidding me?
And like that kind of comedy, I feel is so forced. Like maybe I'm just not with it.
Like I feel like I really like Thor Ragnarok. It's really funny. And it has, I guess, some similarities in terms of the silly humor. But I feel like whereas Taika Waititi is a really good filmmaker, and there's a lot of improv there, and a lot of, and a lot of momentum there. These new Star Wars movies are really just.
The difference is though, Thor is
cringy.
Yeah, awful. Thor goes into it being like, this movie's heavy metal, and it's like hasn't got that rich back.
Also, Thor is basically He-Man. It's kind of ridiculous, and this is kind of coming at a point in the Marvel universe where it's like they're opening up a little more to the creative freedom.
Thor isn't serious.
Whereas Star Wars is kind of like they've completely thrown everything out the window, and they're just like, let's do whatever we want. Let's do slapstick. Let's do whatever. Then, like, I really hate the action in the movie. Like Luke, when Kylo fights Luke, and Luke's doing like Matrix moves, and he's like sliding.
They were kind of cool though.
I was just like,
They were kind of cool.
It's so silly. I don't. It's like, and he's not even there. So it's like, what's the point? Also, why did R2 have a map to where Luke is if he didn't want to be found? Is that a retcon? Was Ryan Johnson saying that R2 had the like someone else put the map into Luke, or
I don't know.
I think that's an oversight. I feel like
that's a little flaw.
Anyway, I think one really big question I had was, this has kind of been coming up in the last couple of days, just recently, and it's like, did Mark Hamill know Luke was going to die? Because there's rumors. I know these are silly rumors, and I don't want to put much stock in them, but I thought it would be interesting to discuss. I feel like Mark Hamill didn't know Luke was going to die, and they kind of edited it that way without him. I don't know if that's true. I think it's just a rumor, but there's some interviews of him talking about the film, and you see him at the premiere. Before he goes in, he's like jumping around happy. After he comes out, he's devastated. And he doesn't say anything. Now, again, at the start of the show, I said, what Mark Hamill says, people are using that as ammunition against not liking the film. And I don't want to make, it's unfair for him. But I think it's really interesting if he didn't know. and just like
the death didn't make sense. In my perspective, I feel
it doesn't make sense for his character. It doesn't kind of finish his arc. It also like
has there ever been a history of a Jedi just dying for apparently being tired?
There's this kind of thing where it's like, well, Obi-Wan kind of lets himself be sacrificed so that he can become one with Force and help Luke in his journey to become a Jedi. And it's kind of like people are saying, oh, it's kind of the same. Where it's
no, doesn't Obi-Wan get murdered?
Pretty much, yeah.
Luke is just I've had enough.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, well, you know, Obi-Wan technically does die before the lightsaber hits him, but it's like, I don't think that's ever been confirmed if he deliberately dissolves before.
Well, from the expanded universe, again, take this with a grain of salt. Yeah. This is not canon anymore. When Jedi die, they don't leave remains.
Yeah.
When they die, they bodily disappear into the Force, if you will. But see,
this is one of the things that the prequels kind of ruined. It's where Jedis had to learn to become one with the Force. And apparently there's a stupid deleted scene in Revenge of the Sith where like Qui-Gon, the ghost of Qui-Gon contacts Obi-Wan and like tells him how to become one with the Force. Like, it's so stupid that
I don't buy it.
For some reason Qui-Gon was the one Jedi who figured out how to become one with the Force. It's so stupid.
That sounds silly.
Have you heard the new George Lucas quotes going around that have been unearthed? Where was it? So the news headline, it was only a couple of days ago. It says George Lucas makes a big Star Wars admission. We're making the Phantom Menace. He quoted as being telling an early screening audience that he may have gone too far in a few places. The movie's a little disjointed. It's bold in terms of jerking people around.
Is this George Lucas talking about the prequels?
This is George Lucas talking about the Phantom Menace.
No way.
And he says, in the space of 90 seconds, we go from lamenting the death of a hero to escaping and then to a slightly comedic scene with Jar Jar and Anakin returning in a very short period of time. It boggles the mind.
Wow.
This is on like some featurette that's been released.
Yeah.
At least he feels remorse.
I mean, it's taken him long enough to realise that he's been trying to defend it.
No, apparently this was set at a Phantom Menace early screening. So he knew it was bad.
No, yeah, have you seen that behind the scenes footage where they watched the first cut of Phantom Menace and everyone's like devastated? It's like dead quiet. Apparently Spielberg was there and he was like, George, this is terrible. Because everyone was like so hyping it up and then they're just like, oh my God. Anyway, what else? Rey does nothing in the movie, even though she's the new character who's supposed to be taking this trilogy and becoming the main character throughout it. She spends the whole movie on the island, then disappears for the climax until she moves the rocks, and then that's her character done. Like, she doesn't really actively do anything. She doesn't really learn anything except that the Jedi suck and that she's going to take the Jedi on her. Sort of, she's going to teach the Jedi. It's like, but she doesn't know anything.
Yeah. How would she teach what she knows innately?
Yeah, and I feel like, again, like, this is where Rian Johnson comes in and he's like, well, the Jedi isn't a thing you can teach. The Force isn't a thing you can teach. It's just something you have. And I feel like, what?
I feel like he doesn't understand the Force.
Yeah, this is the problems I have. So even though Rian Johnson spends the whole movie saying kill the past, let the past die, and let's wipe the slate clean and have these new characters take over, he also spends the whole movie, with Luke instead of Rey, and occasionally he has to go and look at what Finn's doing because Finn's a character they have to have in there.
He's contractually obligated.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, like I said, Rian Johnson legitimizes the prequels. Even though people have spent the last 15 years bashing the prequels, now that The Last Jedi has come out, it's brought out this weird support for the kind of corrupted, sterile world we see in the prequels, where it's like everyone hated them, but now that The Last Jedi kind of re-legitimizes them, everyone's going, oh, but actually it makes sense that Luke doesn't like the Jedi because, what happened in Revenge of the Sith and all this. And it's like, why are people even having this discussion? People hated the prequels. Why are we saying they're...
I don't think anyone honestly wants to defend the prequels. I think that defending the prequels helps them defend The Last Jedi by using it as a reference point. So they can say, yeah, well, The Last Jedi makes sense because look at what happens in the prequels. Yeah. So it just helps them defend The Last Jedi. And it's okay if you like The Last Jedi, right? I mean, art is subjective. Yeah. So if you like it, that's fine. But a lot of people don't for legitimate reasons, and you can't say the prequels aren't that bad to serve your cause when they're objectively terrible.
Yeah, I think Callum's right. People are picking points that they like from movies they hate
to defend,
because they feel they need to defend this movie.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I said it before, but I'll just kind of reiterate how, like, Rian Johnson's trying to deconstruct the Star Wars universe in the middle of this trilogy, when he should just accept all the things in the movie and then talk about and then develop the characters in the world. So you can imagine a Lord of the Rings movie where in the middle of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, they're just like, why are the elves, so good looking, and why are they all rich and everything, and the dwarves are all miners, and that's not fair. Let's have Gimli go off on an adventure where he learns that the elves are actually secretly, enslaving the dwarves, and like Frodo's, like he's not this great hero.
The hobbits aren't good.
The
people.
hobbits are actually, they say the hobbits are pure, and they're innocent, but actually
they're gluttons.
They're gluttons. It's just like
the wizards. Everything about the wizards. The wizards aren't good people.
It's like, why are you getting bogged down in deconstructing the universe? Just accept that there are elves, accept that there are dwarfs, and move on. And that's kind of like the problem with The Last Jedi. It's accept the Force, accept the Jedi, and tell the story and the characters. Don't get bogged down in trying to de-mythologize the movies that everyone loves.
Why is that necessary? Like, that's when people start talking about how it's good to demythologize Star Wars. Yeah. My thought is, but I like my Star Wars mythologized.
Exactly. Like, I want that. Where's that lore? People love. Callum, you and I always talk about the expanded universe. We love all that juicy stuff,
and it keeps the romance. Yeah, like that. I want to say desire to be a Jedi. People want to be a Jedi because they're like the warriors of justice.
Kids growing up wanted to be.
They're space paladins.
Yeah, it's like any medieval movie. You want to be a knight in shining armor. You don't want to be a peasant or whatever.
You don't need reality in these movies.
Exactly.
Good guys are supposed to be good. Bad guys are supposed to be bad.
That's not to say Star Wars movies can't have deep themes or anything like that. It's just you don't want to deconstruct it and say, and talk about when you...
It loses what makes it...
The mystique of the Jedi.
Yeah, that's right. We're almost out of time, but I want to move on to Finn, talk about Finn and Rey. Finn's arc in the movie... He's about to jump ship to protect... To be fair, he's going to protect Rey. He's not jumping ship because he's trying to run away. He's trying to warn Rey to, so whatever. But he gets stopped by Rose. She tases him. Then they have to go off to Canto Bight, the casino planet. And Finn learns, which we've already talked about how terrible it is, where Finn learns that war is bad, okay?
Okay, right.
Okay, war is bad. And... Like in Rogue One, all of that stuff is surface level and completely unnecessary. Rogue One had that scene where the kind of extremist faction, Saw Gerrera's extremist faction, like blew up a Imperial tank, and then there's a little girl crying in the street, and I'm just like, this is so forced and unnecessary and surface level. There's no depth there, even though, everyone likes to pretend Rogue One is this dark war movie. It's not. It's a stupid movie where they tried to make things like a gritty war movie and it failed. And this is the thing with Canto Bight. It's like, why are they kind of trying to deconstruct the war against the First Order? It's like, it's good versus evil. Don't.
But we have to bring capitalism into it.
Yeah, it's like, capitalism's bad, okay? And then like DJ, which is a terrible name. Why is he called DJ? It sounds like a character from a sitcom. But Benicio del Toro's character, tells Finn that both sides are as bad as each other. The best thing to do is just to not join either side and be a free agent.
That's the Star Wars spirit.
Yeah, and I'm just like,
then the First Order wins.
Yeah, and then but Finn doesn't really take that advice at all, and he doesn't really learn anything from that. So the whole thing becomes pointless. But anyway. We learn that war is bad, okay? Now, Rey, alternatively, on the island with Luke, she goes to confront Kylo after getting nothing from Luke and wasting an hour of the movie. And she goes to Kylo and they fight Snoke and his bodyguards. And then Kylo says, join me, Rey. Together we can stop the war. We can get rid of the First Order. We can get rid of the Resistance. We can get rid of the Sith. We can get rid of the Jedi. And... that's it. We'll rule the galaxy together. Everything will be peaceful. Now, from what the audience has learned, war is bad, and the only way to stop the war is not to join either side. But Rey hasn't learned that, so she doesn't know that. So she tells Kylo, I'm not going to join you, you're bad. And I'm just like, well, I think she should have just joined him. And then that way, they could have together had a balance, a yin and yang. He's the more extreme dark side, and she's the more more level-headed light side. And together, they kind of could have stopped the war and, you know, made the galaxy a better place. But because, you know, again, this is Star Wars, you can't have the main character join the villain. And it's like, well, I'm getting mixed signals. Everything in the movie contradicts each other. You know, Rian Johnson's saying there has to be balance. We have to bring an end to the war. War is bad. And you know, Kylo's saying, you know, all this stuff that Luke taught you is a lie, and we should get rid of the Sith, get rid of the Jedi. But at the same time, Rey, the hero, has to reject that idea. It's like, huh? What's he saying? I don't understand what he's saying. Then, of course, Finn returns back to the big ship thing and has a fight with Captain Phasma, who shows up for 5 seconds. Again, wasted.
Contractually obligated scene.
Pointless character, gets killed off. There's also that terrible thing where BB-8 is controlling a walker, and it's just like, oh my god. BB-8, they just turned BB-8 into Inspector Gadget. He's the most powerful character in the movie now. He shoots coins and kills all these guys. Like, he's crazy. Like, it's kind of like R2 in the prequels, where he becomes so powerful. He's got jet propulsion engines and all this stuff. And there's that really weird bit at the start of Revenge of the Sith where he douses some battle droids in oil and then sets them on fire with these rockets. I'm just like, it's really dark and kind of disturbing. And BB-8's kind of the same way. They take everything way too far. And, you know, people who are saying, oh, you know, Last Jedi's way better than the prequels, I'm like, it's the same problems we're having here. But anyway, yeah, Finn, you know, kills Phasma. It's like, there's no real emotion. There's no, I don't care. This is something that should have happened in the first movie to kind of cement his role in the Resistance.
But also, they built Captain Phasma up so much.
That's the thing. It's like,
and we barely saw her.
She could be cut out of the first Force Awakens, and she could be cut out of this film. Like, she should have had that development. It's like, it's why I talked about Boba Fett for like 25 minutes or something. It's not just because Boba Fett's awesome. It's because he's a simple character who, if you cut him out, you have to replace him with a lot of stuff. There's a lot missing there. Whereas Captain Phasma can be cut out with no real repercussions.
Yeah. But like in the media, they built Captain Phasma up as this lady chrome stormtrooper, and she's like, awesome and amazing.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, but in the comic book, she's really cool. She has this cool backstory. I'm like, where's that? Where's that in the movie?
Yeah, where's that? No, in the movies, the stuff we get most readily.
Yeah.
You know, she has like maybe 15 minutes total screen time.
All of the in the expanded universe, and again, I know it's maybe not be fair to compare them because one's not canon anymore.
Yeah.
But the way they handled it before this reboot, all of the stories that took place before the movies and during the movies, they weren't really canon to the same extent that the books were. They were just stories for you to pick up and read. They didn't matter.
Yeah.
There was no real backstory there.
Yeah.
And all of the stuff that came after the movies. There was no backstory introduced for characters.
You watch the movies without having to know anything else.
Everything else is just to supplementary material.
That's why it's the expanded universe. Yeah. To expand the lore, to expand...
So we shouldn't have to read the comics to understand Phasma, because in the way they did it in the old days was characters were defined in the movies.
A movie should be self-contained, and then you can evolve
it's supplementary material.
It's supplementary, exactly, yeah. Then Finn is going to sacrifice himself to blow up that stupid giant laser miniaturized Death Star tech. He says it is.
Isn't it just like a Star Destroyer engine or something?
It's just a really big laser gun thing. Why does everything have a really big laser gun in Last Jedi? There's the Dreadnought, which has a really big laser gun, and then there's this door ram, which has a really... It's like... People complained about Starkiller Base being just another Death Star. It's like, this movie has pretty much 2 little Death Stars. It's like... like, what?
What's better than one big Death Star?
Yeah, if everyone has these giant lasers, why don't they just put them on tanks and shoot each other like Tom and Jerry? Like, it's ridiculous. There's giant things everywhere. So Finn's flying towards this because that's another stupid scene. Why are the AT-ATs even there? In Empire Strikes Back, it makes sense because the Rebellion has their shield up, so the Empire can't do a laser barrage, artillery barrage. They have to penetrate it with ground troops. That's why they put the AT-ATs down, so they can walk towards the the rebel base. But in this movie, it doesn't make sense because
there's no protective
shield. So they
could just blow the planet up.
Yeah, and then it's like you could say, well, Holdo used lightspeed to blow up all the ships. I'm like, but then how did they land the AT-ATs if they didn't have any ships, or how did they get that giant laser there?
There'd be other
or
destroyers.
Why didn't they just tilt that laser?
Convoy.
Why didn't they just tilt that laser battering ram down from space? Like, it's just silly. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, Finn's about to sacrifice himself, which I think would have been a good end to his arc because he's a useless character. He doesn't really have much left to do or learn. And then Rose saves him, and I'm just kind of like, she blamed him for being selfish, for wanting to get into the escape pod, but she herself is selfish by to stopping Finn from saving, because she didn't know Luke was going to show up. So she stops Finn from saving the Resistance, who are on their last legs. So she would have given up all those people's lives just to save Finn, and that's not character development. That's stupid. That doesn't make sense.
I think that if they were trying to play up the whole love thing, realistically, she would have stopped him before. I think that she would have said, "Don't do this." Or, X, Y,
I
Z.
think it would have been better if she sacrificed herself in place of him. At least that way, there's still. But it just like they also, when they're on Canto Bight, they give a lot of Finn's development to Rose, where Rose is telling stories about where she grew up and how bad the First Order are and stuff. I'm like, we still don't learn anything about Finn. Like, why didn't he respond to her? Like, I know exactly what you mean. I grew up in the First Order. I was treated so badly. No, we don't learn anything. They really waste time with new characters who are not interesting when they should be, trying to develop the old characters who they haven't been doing a good job with. Yeah, so Finn would have sacrificed himself and saved the day, really. And the only reason it isn't is because Rian Johnson says so, and so Luke can force project himself onto the planet. It's really silly.
And then die.
And then die anyway. So he should have just gone to the planet, like if he was going to die anyway. But then it's like I feel like Rian Johnson, to give Rian Johnson some credit, I feel like he wanted to kill Finn, but that's probably one of the Disney things where they put their foot down. Where Disney was like, you can do some weird stuff, but you can't kill off Finn because technically he's a new main character and we have to sell toys and etc. So I feel like that's a case.
I'm still wondering whether or not if Mark Hamill knew Luke was going to die.
Dude, I'll send you that video of him before the premiere and after.
Please do, because it's like I can just imagine Rian Johnson being like, "How else can we be provocative, de-mythologize? I know we can kill Luke in editing."
Like I said, it's all rumors and stuff, but it's just so weird to think about. Like,
there's that story of Mark Hamill only finding out about Darth Vader's identity when he turned up for filming.
Yeah.
And of course, Harrison Ford didn't have any idea, and no one else did.
Well, Harrison Ford wasn't there. But the only people who knew were George Lucas, the director Irvin Kershner, and then they let Mark Hamill know for his performance, so that when he reacted, it made sense. What David Prowse, the actor in the Darth Vader suit, said, because on the script it said Obi-Wan is your father. So that they were keeping it a secret because they didn't want it to get out. And then later, of course, James Earl Jones dubbed the voice to say, I am your father.
So there is like kind of, I guess, a tradition of changing endings.
That's a case of where you don't want to spoil it. Yeah, you don't. They do that in a lot of movies where they don't want to spoil it for fans.
Thor was having an eye on all the trailers.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good point. That's another case. Whereas this is like they gave Mark Hamill filmed the movie, and then in editing they killed him. And of course I was kind of like, I would be mad. Like, his arc isn't finished. His redemption, he hasn't had any redemption.
He's expecting to go back for the next movie, and they're just like, sorry, Luke.
Sorry, Mark. Sorry, Mark. Lock up his trailer. You can't get in.
Get your stuff.
Oh man, we've run out of time. I still got heaps to talk about. We'll be back next week with more Last Jedi. I know people might be sick of it by now, but I think it's really important to talk about that the problems with this movie aren't just in the movie itself. even though the movie has a lot of problems in the movie itself, it's like it becomes a larger
It's good to address it.
discussion of, you know, superhero movies and Disney and the filmmaking industry at the moment. And that's what this show's all about. And like I said, like, you know, if I get a podcast started, I can start doing, you know, shows like this on the podcast, and I can keep this show for regular reviews and stuff. But we'll see where that goes. Thank you very much to Callum and Nathan for coming in again.
Thank you for having
Anytime.
us.
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the listeners out there. Thank you very much. Please like and share the Man vs. Movies Facebook page, and you can rate, review, and subscribe the Man vs. Movies iTunes podcast. That would be really helpful. Stick around if you're listening live on the radio. Matt's up next with his show Car Talk. I'm pretty sure that's it. May the force be with you, and catch you later. We hope you enjoyed this special flashback episode. What you just heard was a re-upload of an old show. If you'd like to keep up with our current show, The Tuesday Review, please like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Tuesday Review AU, and rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. You can find The Tuesday Review wherever you listen to podcasts. Adios, cousins.